Okay, everybody. We're going to begin. Again, this is a special meeting of the City Council. I'd like to now call this meeting to order. There shall be a special meeting of the Holyoke City Council called by the Council President, yours truly, for 6:30 this evening, Monday, June 1st. On the agenda for this evening, and just for these particular items shall we discuss, and the overall revenue is the mayor, auditor, tax collector, assessors, and treasurer's office. So we'll also be discussing their budgets as well. So to take attendance, I'm just going to go around the room and note who is here and who is not here. And I do notice the presence of a quorum. So first of all, Councilor McGee is not here. Councilor Bresnahan is not here. Councilor Tallman is here. Councilor Soto is here. Councilor Leahy is here. Councilor LeBron Martinez is here. Councilor McGivern is here. Councilor Vacan is here. Councilor Shatnoff is here. Councilor Valentin is here. And Councilor Jordan is here. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America.
And the City of Holyoke. All right, I am now going to take my seat over here for the remainder of the evening. And our first distinguished guests are our mayor, Alex Morse, as well as our city auditor, Bellamy Schmidt. Alex, I turn the floor over to you to any introductory remarks you'd like to make, and then we can discuss any overall revenue discussion, and then we'll get into the mayor's budget as well as the auditor's budget, if there's any questions on any of those.
Yep.
Alex.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councilor Jordan, and thank you, councilors, for taking the time tonight to discuss the FY16 budget. I'll open with a little bit based on the communication I sent along with the budget a few weeks ago, and then I handed out a brief PowerPoint presentation, a few pages long in front of you, and I'll briefly go through that as well. And so after much due diligence and an eye towards fiscal stability, I present you with $127,104,346 budget for FY16, an increase of just 1% over the budget I presented last fiscal year. This year's budget process continued the honest budgeting practices we began to implement last year based on the recommendations of the Fiscal Advisory Committee formed under the Chamber and the Taxpayer Association. It's a document that is an honest reflection of the needs of the city and based on historic trends. You will notice that line items typically underfunded in the past, such as veterans benefits, snow removal, and overtime, are now funded at an adequate level. In addition, we have estimated revenues based on the same historic trends and have accounted for a modest 1.5% increase in property values. This document also includes information that councilors have requested in the past, such as departmental revenue, an itemized breakout of police overtime, and a legend that defines employee pay codes for the first time. The budget is lean. Many departments within City Hall Annex will see no increases over FY15, and many will see decreases. It calls for no layoffs or furloughs at this time, and I don't expect to propose any additional cuts in personnel before the budget is balanced and tax rate is set later this year. There may be opportunities for additional cost savings as part of our departmental reorganization plans that I will submit to the council later this month. And in the budget, as always, we seek to preserve essential city services, enhance city services such as public safety, public works, while also fighting blight around the city. The budget preserves those services in our departments through investments in the addition of various new positions. The police department, for example, will see an additional $20,000 for reserve officers. The personnel department will see the creation of a second personnel assistant, which is called for in both the Collins Center report and the recently reviewed report by the Mass Department of Revenue. The law department, I've proposed to see funding for an additional assistant solicitor who will focus on civil litigation and work hand in hand with the new CDBG funded position focusing on receivership and code enforcement. This position will also allow us to reduce the need for outside counsel. After departments submitted all of their requests, those requests for FY16 together totaled $130,338,000. After meeting with individual department heads, I've made about $3.2 million in cuts from those requests. The budget for the schools at this time is $64,130,000. That number is subject to change based on the conference between the House and the Senate and the eventual budget signed by Governor Baker, and there might be some variation based on transportation, and we've already been in meetings with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education about preliminary numbers and any changes they want to make in the budget. As you'll see, well over half of all the budget increases in FY16 are fixed costs. As the council is aware, this budget also includes salary adjustments for those city employees that are members of particular collective bargaining units. The administration recently signed 3-year contracts with the clerical, the council on aging, and the professional supervisors unions, and that does have a cost, and that's reflected in the budget as well. Let's see. Given current projections from the state and current allocations, I anticipate there being a general fund deficit in the amount of approximately $2.5 million. However, in working with Bellamy and Acting Treasurer Sandy Smith, we've developed a plan that will balance this budget using 2 new sources of revenue. First, this will be accomplished through the sale of a number of instruments of taking, commonly known as tax titles. This is not a sale of property, but a sale of the debt associated with that property. This is very similar to the way we currently handle delinquent excise tax bills. Because of the way the state treats this type of revenue, we are not able to include it as part of our estimated local receipts on the budget recapitulation sheet. They will be included as part of free cash that will be certified this fall. If successful, we will conduct a second sale in FY16 for use in FY17. And by selling the city's tax titles, we are confident we will bring in at least $2.1 million. Second, as presented before, I'm requesting the council double the monthly parking fees at our municipal parking facilities, bringing it in line with the market, which would raise the city an additional $100,000 annually. In addition to the general fund deficit, as has existed in the past, there is a sewer fund deficit in the amount of $1.3 million. On its face, it'd be easy to assume that this is due to rising costs associated with operating the sewage treatment plant. That is not accurate. Nearly 100% of this deficit is due to interest on bonds required to address the unfunded federal mandate, requiring improvements to our combined sewer overflow system. Absent any action by this body, this money will have to be raised via the general fund by all taxpayers, as has been done in the past. In the past, I have asked the council to address this through increasing the sewer rate. After researching how other communities have tackled this unfair federal mandate, I no longer feel a rate increase is needed. Rather, I think we should implement a stormwater utility fee to close this deficit. This would bring us in line with neighboring communities such as Chicopee and Westfield. And my administration will provide additional details on this proposal in the coming weeks to spark debate. If the city does nothing to address the sewer deficit in the next few months, we will be forced to take $1.3 million from our certified free cash account or the city stabilization fund, as the city has unfortunately had to do in the past. I do prefer we tackle this head-on to avoid such a decision. And in the past, I also continued to advocate for the creation and the adoption of 40N to combine both the water and sewer departments to allow the city to aggressively collect unpaid bills. Overall, I do acknowledge that while making these strategic adjustments to the budget is a promising start, it will not be enough. In order for us to maintain the current level of city services we provide, we must aggressively work towards attracting new growth and expanding our tax base. In general, I do say that the city is in good financial shape. Our stabilization fund is currently at $12.2 million, represents a 3% or $358,000 increase over last year, and the fund over the last 5 years is up 22.25%. I do at this point want to switch over to the PowerPoint to review that quickly, and then we can get into questions in terms of the overall budget. And then at the conclusion of my presentation and answering questions, we'll pass that on to the other department heads in the finance arena. You'll see on the first page of the presentation the total budget FY16, $127 million or so, and it's divided by the general fund and the school budget. As I've already said, we've approached the FY16 budget with a policy of budgetary honesty. So number one, a fully funded expense budget, which is different than in the past. Number two, a fully funded revenue budget. And Bellamy will get into the differences in revenue and expenses, and no gamesmanship like underfunding snow removal or overtime. As stated, the budget includes the following revenue assumptions: a continued tax levy limit, modest growth in assessed values of homes, new revenue from the Geriatric Authority, and one-time income from the sale of tax titles. The budget also includes assumptions around expenses. Total expenses up less than 1% over FY 2014. Major drivers of increases are bond interest and health insurance, and management decisions in place to support cost reductions like fire department overtime. And then again, selective pruning of underutilized services we're also exploring. You'll see this on the next page. Expenses show only modest growth over the past 4 years. So the first budget I presented was the FY 13 budget, and the general fund expense at that point was $61.5 million, and the FY 16 is $62.9 million. So over four budget years, we've seen an increase of just $1.6 million, which is about 2.6%. The next page is a pie chart, and you'll see that 63% of the increases in the FY 16 budget are fixed cost. And so it has it divided by retirement, health insurance, payments for long-term debt, veterans benefits, which you've learned a little bit more about through Jim Mahoney and talking about the beefed up services that the city provides via the state, and short-term debt. You'll also note on the next page that we pointed out 6 areas in the budget that comprise a vast majority of the budget, 82% of the budget. You'll see that police, fire, the DPW, retirement, health insurance, and debt service comprise 82% of the budget, and the pie chart on the next page shows it a little more clear, and 18% is all other departments, just to give you sort of a mental picture of where the city's funds are going when we talk about some of the smaller departments in the city and the bang we're getting out of those departments. To minimize the impact of the tax ceiling, we're being more aggressive with revenues. You'll see in the FY 15 budget, we estimated that revenues would come in at $6.5 million when they actually came in at $8.7 million. And so one of the recommendations from the Fiscal Advisory Committee was that the city does need to be run more like a business in terms of its finances, and most companies don't deliberately underfund their revenues. Perhaps we do it to some extent to be conservative, to allow for some wiggle room in case revenues don't come in at the extent we were expecting, but $2.2 million is a bit high there. So in this budget, we've projected $8.3 million, which we expect will allow us with at least $400,000 to $500,000 of wiggle room if anything was to go, if any revenues were to go down a little bit throughout the year. And we're also selling tax titles to raise additional revenue, as I stated. Again, the stormwater fee to cure the stormwater deficit in the sewer fund. And as at the same time I presented the budget a few weeks ago, I also issued to you a policy to guide the use of our stabilization fund, which we think is the first policy around this, and it gets very specific, and it was replicated from other communities, tweaked for Holyoke, and also recommended by our outside auditors that work closely with Sandy and Bellamy to put that document together. And so with that, that's just an overall picture of the budget for the next fiscal year. As always, it's the fourth time doing this. If people have specific questions of what's in the budget, overall trends, we can answer those questions, and then when I'm done, you'll hear from Bellamy and each financial department head this evening.
Great. Before we get in, Bellamy, did you want to go over the changes? We now have a new proposal. Is that going to be lengthy, you think, to go through?
There were 4 changes.
4 changes. So can you just kind of go through that, and then I'm going to
There was,
open it up to some questions. Yeah.
yeah, there was a typo for police and fire,
Typo for-
and it, in, the typo said that we were gonna spend $47,000 for 8 police lieutenants. The correct number is in the new budget, which is
Okay.
$706,603.
All right, so
Right,
let's
what-
just
what
go
page
to,
are we on?
yeah, let's just go to the page, Bellamy, so
That's
we can
page
see.
18 of the new.
18 of the new one.
Can we explain what the new is? Because I've
The
worked
white
with
The
this,
white one on your desk that was
I've
left
worked with
tonight.
this green book for 2 weeks now. Do I throw it away?
The white one.
Going out, yeah.
I'm serious.
No,
This is what was presented to us.
I have a question, I actually do have a question around this, is, have we checked with the law department?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. And
Yes, we
and you're
have.
gonna give us some counsel that you've relayed from them is, can you reiterate to us the ability to make changes inside the 45-day window? Because now we lack the
Yeah, the
45
mayor
days.
can make changes in the budget anytime that he wants. In essence, is what the law says.
Okay.
And that's my paraphrasing of what
And that's, and
Karen
they,
and I looked at.
all right. And even though we're no longer with that 45-day window, okay.
The 45 window just increased with the supplemental budget presented to us. We now have 45 days from today.
We'll have to look into that, Joe. That's,
That's not what we said.
I know
not
that
the
we're
way
supposed to
we were-
have a budget for July 1st.
It's a supplemental budget, Mr. President,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
They can do it, but the 45 days increases.
Okay. So, we'll definitely explore that issue, at some point, and unfortunately, the law department's not here this evening, but let's just, again, walk through the changes. So you mentioned page 18.
Right.
And you said it was what line?
The third one down.
Police lieutenants. Okay, so here originally it said 47,403.
Right, and now
You're
it's-
saying
The
it's.
correct number is 706,603.
Okay, 706,603. Okay,
The same thing happened on page 20. For fire captains, it said 47, whatever it was, and it now is 649,832,
so
which
what
is the
does,
correct number.
what does that change total departmental expenditure now to,
Which one?
for police?
Hold on. 12,305, 742.
12 million.
Million.
12,305, 742. 12 million.
Million.
Wait a minute.
million.
Even I'm confused. 12 million.
All right,
12,705, 305, 742.
okay, so now,
Mr. President, but that's not the number that we see in the white book for
It is
total
Yeah,
total
it's on
department.
the
It's on the second page of the white book. I mean, it's on
On
page
page 19.
20.
I see 12, 305,
Or page 21.
742.
Even I'm lost now.
20 is the fire
Page
department.
19, which is where the
19.
total is. Because for police department, it's a two-page budget.
Yep, got it.
so now that represents an increase over last year's budget then, effectively, right?
For the police, yes, a slight increase, yes.
Okay, keep that in mind. All right, you wanted to tell us about the fire department?
Same thing, that same third line, captains. It was 47 something. I don't have the old, but the new
okay.
number is 649, 832.
649, 832.
And the total becomes 8,122,044.
Eight one two two oh four four. Now, do these changes in any way impact the numbers Alex has been using, or these were strictly wrong here, but he had the original correct numbers in his initial letter and analysis?
Didn't have the right numbers in the initial, well,
Okay, so does his 2.5 deficit become 3.8 or whatever the new number is?
No, the one I said tonight reflects the
what he
changes.
said tonight is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because basically, these are the numbers we've been using all along, and then there was the typo, and then all of a sudden, things got changed.
But in Alex's
when I
letter,
was not here.
Alex, in the letter that you gave us on May 14th.
It's
does-
changed,
do-
it's changed since then,
Okay,
yeah.
Right. Tonight's
Yes.
letter,
So there was 4 typos in the budget. Bellamy will describe those 4 typos. It's had an overall impact on the budget, which
Okay.
I explained the accurate numbers in both the PowerPoint presentation and in my communication tonight.
okay. Because I just want to see how some of that change, because obviously I had a bunch of questions regarding your letter, and I'll just have to go through it. Okay, so we have 2 of the 4 changes. Can you give us the third change?
it's tax collector,
Tax collector, and that's on page
postage, page 7.
7, okay.
The Postage was 0, it's now 7,000. Right, David?
David says thank you.
Yeah, I know he does.
Postage, 0, and it's now 7,000?
7,000, right.
7,000.
Add that to the total.
The new total is 218,693.
Doesn't pull these pages out.
Okay,
And the last one is the building commissioner, page 22. And this was a request that came in last week, and the plumbing and gas inspector, we changed the grade. The original grade was 38, the grade is now 42, to give him more wiggle room to negotiate a salary with a new hire,
so what's that pay now changed
to
to?
50,504 maximum.
5504, from 48,880.
Right, correct.
Budgeting the maximum?
From 38. Right?
From grade 38 to grade 42, S38 to S42, $48,880 to $50,504.
Isn't that the same position that we just had through finance recently? And we were told that the pay was gonna be 45,000.
Right.
Apparently, he's not been able to hire someone at that rate. I don't know too much about
Oh, he
this.
said he had two guys at 45. Because the old pay was 36.
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. We will plumb into that. Counselor Leahy.
Yeah, thank you, Bellamy, and thank you, Mayor, for coming down here tonight to go over this budget process. As everybody knows, this is one of the most important nights, I believe, in the budgetary process that we have. So thank you for coming down and giving your well-prepared marks. My comments are, not comments so much, but just a couple quick questions, kind of overview. And looking through your presentation, one of the things that you discussed is having this kind of as a realistic budget. But my questions to you is, first of all, we'll start in the mayor's office, where last year the budget was 246,592. I'm sorry, this year it's 246,592, and last year was 221,204, which is an increase of 10%. Can you just walk me through that increase?
Yeah, the biggest, so personnel has changed, has stayed the same. Nothing's changed there. Actually, there is a bit of an increase. Well, per ordinance, there's a $7,200 increase, and so that ordinance is there. We're just honoring that. The only other thing, and we debated this last year, was the dues and subscriptions. So in the past, historically, that's been allocated at $10,000. Last year, the council opted to cut that by $7,000. Down to $3,000. We've opted to request to bring that back up to $10,000. And last year, that's both the membership to both the Mass Municipal Association for both the mayor and the council are included in that $10,000, and the annual membership for the U.S. Conference of Mayors is included in that.
Okay, just if you could, maybe briefly, because I was one of the people that voted to cut that, and I probably will cut it again this year as well. My question, how did you get the 7,373? If we brought it down to 3,000, how is the money transferred into that account?
Money was never transferred into the account.
Okay, so how did we end up in fiscal year 2014 with $7,373 in there? When the council only, voted for 3,000?
That was the prior fiscal year,
Oh, right,
not
okay.
the current fiscal year.
Okay, so I guess walking in the same line item is, what exactly, what do you think we're gonna benefit from the Mass Municipal Association and the U.S. Congress of Mayors, How
Yeah,
can I go
the-
to my voters to say, that was well worth it?
Yeah, well, I think historically, it's always been something that's in there. Previous mayors have always had the opportunity to join the Mass Municipal Association and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. There is a detailed communication from the Mass Municipal Association that I can provide to the council. Right now, we're the only city in town out of the 351 cities and towns that is not an official member of the Mass Municipal Association because of the cut last year, and so they're aware of that. There is an annual trade show that both counselors are able to go. There's forums with the Governor Baker and his members of his cabinet on the budget, Secretary of Finance, Veterans, Economic Development, that we haven't been afforded that information. So that's number one. In terms of U.S. Conference of Mayors, it's always presented an opportunity for for me, my first couple of years to meet with the President's Secretariats, Housing and Urban Development. You have first access to federal grants and programs, network with other mayors, obviously, and replicate best practices. I know former Mayor Mike Sullivan was an active member of the U.S. Conference, and I've been an active member the first few years as well. And so in terms of the MMA in particular, I could provide a detailed response from them as to the benefits to Holyoke.
And my second question is your car allowance.
Yep.
It's going up from 5,200 to 7,200. Can you just walk me through that?
Yeah, that's actually not an increase. The 5,200 was a transfer because it took effect. We actually were able to transfer money from an unexpended line item last year, so we didn't have to come back for more funds for that. But the 7,200 is reflective of a full fiscal year.
Okay, so if the city is giving you that much money, why do you need the in-state travel of, you're looking for $3,000?
The in-state travel is not for my office, it's for the entire city. So when a department head needs to go to Boston or something, they use that account. It's not for me.
Oh, okay. And also, we're looking at, for overtime for the police, for instance. Right now, you have a budget of $571,000. And I think it's usually closer to $1 million. And
So we, so you'll see that's 571 for the first time this year. I know a couple of counselors requested it. You'll see there's 4 line items under that: parade, fireworks, festival, elections, and snow tows. We've broken down that overtime. So add an additional 47, 33, 30, and 19
Okay.
to that 571.
okay.
We wanted to be able to try to paint a picture of where the overtime is being spent based on what city officials expect
Yeah, no,
from our police department.
Yeah, I like that. And one of the things that just happened in the ordinance committee the other night, they were talking about with the geriatric authority closing and looking at their $4,000 stipend, looking to hand that over to the planning board. And I love the volunteers, I love the planning, I love every, I was on the zoning board of appeals for years. My wife was on the conservation commission and the license board. At times such as now, shouldn't we, instead of giving $4,000 to members, shouldn't we be using that for other things, such as maybe the fire truck that's been closed,
What $4,000 are you talking
the
about?
stipend
For the geriatric authority? That's not included in the city budget.
It's a proposal and ordinance that,
And I filed it.
that Counselor Lisi had filed, but I believe it's still in committee for debate.
We actually, if I may.
Yeah.
We sent it out of committee. It was never the city's $4,000 to get reimbursed. Now that the geriatric authority is dissolved, it was GAH money that was used to pay their board members, and so we explored it in committee. It's not our money, so it's not going anywhere.
They're paying it out of their revenue.
I see, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I agree, I would have no interest in.
That's just a question that
paying
somebody,
that, yeah.
somebody posed. All right, I'm good for now, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, no problem.
Alex, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was to revisit the personnel office again. I know you came in for, and I know you had requested this last year regarding that study for the second additional position in the personnel office, but as you may recall, one of the concerns that myself and a number of other counselors had is that we have about anywhere between 9 and 11 people that perform personnel functions in the city. And the question was, wouldn't it be best if we could get those folks talking to each other and get some synergies going between that before we add yet another position? And unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've moved the ball anywhere in the last 12 months about these conversations to consolidate the personnel function. It seems like if we could ever get our act together in that regard, we wouldn't really need this position. And in light of our dire financial condition, I don't think we're really in a position to be adding new jobs, except with, clear, I'll save the law department one with regarding to the receivership and it's the payback function of that. But in personnel,
Yeah, I would defer to the council on that. I will say that the personnel department has functioned and it will continue to function. With or without this, I do think the Collins Center looked at the department and recommended that the city do this. you know, given the workload and comparing that to other communities, there has been resistance from the school department over the last few years for, towards consolidation. I do think, as we've said in the past, that it would require the council working with us in looking at sort of the structure and how we would go about achieving that with the Holyoke Gas and Electric, the water department, the city, and the schools.
I wanted to ask you, one of the things, thank you for that, and the next thing I wanted to ask you about was Veterans Benefits Direct. As you know, you've requested an increase in the appropriation by about $130,000, which to me is perfectly fine. But as you know, we get 75% reimbursement for that from the state. I wanted to know, where do you capture that additional revenue in here? I don't see it mentioned either in your memorandum or otherwise, but that would also generate an additional $100,000 in revenue. We don't seem to capture that anywhere in our analysis.
Yeah, that is a good point. It would be recalculated as free cash in the following fiscal year. I don't know, Bellamy, if you were capture that in revenue.
It's captured as part of the revenue we get from the state, the cherry sheet revenue, if that's if that term you recognize.
So
So
you actually,
there's a line on the cherry sheet for veterans benefits, for the 5 or so different things we get from the state.
did you increase it this year? I didn't get that level of detail on your report. Did you
yes,
increase it by the 100,000?
Well, we don't increase it, they tell us what they're gonna give us. It did go up some, yes. I don't recall the exact,
It's just pretty much, it's a straight formula, and maybe you could provide us a full copy of the budget recap sheet, because when you go
it's
to
attached,
the amount to be
it was
raised.
stuck in the white book, there was a budget recap sheet.
No, I have it, but there's some pages missing, because there's a further drill down. Like, for example, if you go to,
At this point in the process, there is no further drill down, this is the entire budget.
all right,
recap.
well, I do not have the
Whatever you
page
need,
that
I
are,
can find.
yeah, when you look to the local receivables,
Yep, local receipts, yep.
I don't see the line here for,
Be-
state benefits back.
Because it's not on that page, it's, on page 2, we have, number 2C, estate and cherry sheet charges, and somewhere also is estimated receipts, but I got item 3A, 3A1, cherry sheet estimated receipts.
Yeah, 3A1, 82,736, 162, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah, but then when
So
you,
it's buried in there. I mean, that's where it is. I mean,
yeah, I understand that, but I
can
want
send you the
to,
breakdown that came from the state, because it's on the state website. I can send you a copy of it.
yeah,
fine.
that's exactly what I'm
That's
driving
easy.
at. I want the breakdown that,
Yeah.
each one of those lines on the second page, which is sections 2 and 3 of the recap, I think the counselors would benefit immensely from the breakdown as to what comprises those numbers, and those are available from the DOR. So I would, if you could get those to us, that would be
Yeah.
helpful.
No, it's a simple, there's 2 pages. One page has the charges and one page
I
has
just
the-
want to see what
has the
comprises the
receipts.
82 million.
Mr. President,
Yeah, Counselor Bacon.
if I may, to that point, it's important for us to know out of the Veterans Department that all of those direct payments have been billed out to the state. Because if they have not been properly filed out of the department, we won't be eligible for the 75% back. And we had discussions that there is a lag, but it should be, because there is a lag, very easy to accurately talk about what revenues will be coming back. But it does depend upon that reimbursement filing being properly filed with the state. Because we can't afford not to get that match.
And as far as I know, the Veterans Department is fully up to date on their billings, because they're complaining too that they haven't, there's this huge lag, almost a year lag in getting paid.
Right.
The law itself says that all the payments are due by November of, I guess for the previous year, due by November of this year, but they're still paying us now for receipts a year ago.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is on the budget recap sheet, under local receipts. I'm looking at line 17, licenses and permits of 670,000. What was that line last year? Do you happen to know, or? I wanted to want, all right. If you could look into that, because one of the things I wanted to ask you is, where is the 540,000 that we're gonna be capturing for the geriatric authority revenue dropping in the revenue sheet?
Probably in there, because it's a license.
That's why I wanted to compare to last year's number. What's that? Oh, it was 568? Four, all right. So right now, we got it at 670, so I'm not sure we got the whole 540 in there. If you could, take a peek at that, I'd like to know where the 540 from the GAH revenue is dropping. Just going through some more of Alex's, letter here, I just wanted to see if there was any other revenue, numbers. On the sale of which is one of the other things that we're counting on for about $2 million, the sale of our tax titles. What is the percentage of discount that's given to those? It's selling a debt, essentially, correct? I mean, we're foregoing our right to collect on a tax title to some entity that's purchasing it from us?
Not quite.
Okay, explain.
Explain, yes. that
Thank
was
you.
We are selling the tax title, which means we are selling both the amount owed for tax payments due, as well as the interest that has accrued upon those titles, which is charged at 16% a year. So whenever we collect a tax title, we make some nice money on it. So we sell the title, and then the buyer gives us 100% of the title and the interest. There's no discount. They give us 100%, and if we're lucky and there's multiple bidders for the tax title portfolio, we get a premium above it as opposed to a discount below it.
Okay,
After the titles are sold, the buyer commits to paying all future taxes on those properties until such time as the owner redeems the tax title with the new owner, or the properties are foreclosed upon. So it's a huge win for us.
is this something new that we've been doing?
Well, we just started doing it. I don't know how old it is in the state, in Massachusetts, a few years. Does anybody know? But
I see the assessor raising his hand, maybe Sandy also?
Yeah.
We had preliminary discussions about when Mayor Sullivan was here,
Okay,
Yeah.
saying there's certain companies that do it. We had them at least 5 to 7 years ago.
okay.
So it's been around.
But it's been around for a while, but we just started doing it over, the last year or two, or?
We haven't done it at all.
This is brand new.
This is brand new.
Interesting.
This was identified because of our budget problems. Here's a potential
Cash flow,
solution.
yeah, right.
And we talked to West Springfield, who's done it quite successfully.
Okay.
We've talked to some, Westfield does it. I think Pittsfield does it. We just watched an auction where Pittsfield was selling some of their titles, so.
Okay, great. So we're getting the full amount
But,
that's owed to us then?
What's interesting is when you dig into it, you find that we are owed $8.1 million in tax titles. A lot of those are, some of those are imperfect or were improperly formed by the tax, either collector or assessor when it was done. Like all of 2007 is a mess and we can't sell any of those. So there's a lot out there, and we're gonna do whatever we can to sell as many as we can this year, and then more in the coming year, to try to get those off of our books.
Okay, great. There was a number of counselors that had their hands up, starting with Counselor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing I'd like to request is an updated letter that includes the updated numbers and the analysis that you gave to us verbally tonight, Mayor, if you would. So that the summaries I have match up with the documents we have in front of us. And I have a couple of general comments, and then a couple specific questions. My general comment is that this is a budget held together with one-time fixes to basically kick the can down the road so that we can maintain business as usual. The most disturbing thing about this budget is that if you look at a number of the pages, and you run across the total personal services line on each page, you will see a significant increase from the total of budgeted through 2015 to the budget in front of us. Now, it's fine and wonderful to say that the budget's only growing by 1%, but when you total all of those across, just on that line, I ask each and every one of the counselors to do that and look at the percentage of growth in that component of the budget, which has been fairly stated is a significant amount of the budget. For every dollar of growth we have in those lines in the total, these are base increases to the pension costs, the health insurance costs, the cost of government in the city. This is where the foundation of all the future costs is built. The things below the line, which you will see are consistently lower, are the things that are controllable on a day-to-day basis. But make no mistake, this is a growth budget, both in terms of the cost of personnel and the number of personnel here in the city. And we have to understand it for what it is. Now, to sell the tax titles is a one-time, maybe a two-time revenue bump. And the other revenue enhancement that this is built on, because we're at the tax ceiling, and the reason we're at the tax ceiling is because based on the will of the voters, if our city government is costing more than the value of our city is, that 2.5% number, then we've outgrown the ability of the taxpayers to support it. So we're looking for other revenues to sustain a budget that is in an operational deficit. So what are we doing? We jacked up the meals tax. Now we're looking at a stormwater fee. Now, mind you, the people who cannot access the sewer system, and I wish more of the finance committee that was advising us understood Holyoke and understood that Holyoke is not all on a sewer system like perhaps Chicopee is, so that they need to be looking at apples and apples when they're giving us advice, to go to taxpayers who for the last 2 years have already been subsidizing the sewer system, which they cannot access, and then in addition to that, to go to them and say, and now we're going to cost you extra money because you're going to pay for the stormwater that, by the way, can't get to that side of the city. I don't care how you try to do those numbers. That is a double charge on people that already aren't getting a service. So how you twist that around to call it fair and equitable is a word game I'll gladly engage in, because I can win that argument, and I'll have that argument from now till we pass the budget. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of citizens paying attention to this one, because there are people writing to me, there are people talking to me, and they're like, enough is enough. So don't balance this budget on the backs of the people that are already helping out with a deficit. It's like bad government. If they want to live in a socialistic country, they'd move to one. Thank you anyway. So I encourage all of you to look across these numbers. You know, we're looking at a budgeted expense in the mayor's office for 2 people in 2015 of $68,328. Next year, those same 2 people are going to cost $81,528. Nobody I work with is getting raises like that. And I don't think anybody you guys work with is either. So I really think we have to look at it for what it is and see where the growth in the budget exists and where the cuts exist. If you look at the overtime and you look at the snow removal, you can say, yeah, it's higher than it was last year. But is it realistic if you look back 3 years and average it? I'd question that, because if you are going to do real budgeting, you got to look back at what you actually paid. The other number that, if it could be provided to us, would be very helpful is what, since we're 11 months into the year, what are the actual expenses for fiscal year 2015 projected at right now? Because we have this budget in front of us, and we're comparing a budget to a budget, But we all know, we sat here and voted hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra cash transfers. So I'd like to know, for comparison to the budget we're looking at, what we actually spent, what will be projected to have actually been spent. And then I think we'll have a better way of being able to gauge how realistic the budget is that we're looking at. So for going forward into all the departments, my questions will be the same as in that line, 51,103, how we get from one salary number to the salary number in the budget. And so that will be a consistent question that the different departments will be hearing from me. It appears that the assumption is made that the new salary scale will be approved and that that is what these numbers are based on. But I can't tell exactly by just looking at numbers. I can only tell that they've changed significantly.
Just on that point, Alex, can you address the issue of, and it was a question, in the budget that you have submitted, do any of the budgets that you've submitted for pay for anybody exceed the current legal maximum for those positions? I know there's a proposal in ordinance.
There's a proposal on the table, but we've assumed that hasn't passed.
Okay, so
As
all
of
of this
now.
is legally compliant with
The
whatever
only-
caps exist now?
Yeah, the only raises in here are legal because they're contractual, as I mentioned, with the clerical professional supervisors and one other bargaining unit.
Okay.
And so those are all legal increases to pay that were negotiated and executed.
Okay, and same with the plumbing gentleman, that plumbing position, that's,
That's a union position.
okay, is that compliant with what the current agreement calls for in there? Okay, all right.
So, Mr. President, in just the detail of my other question, could the mayor walk us through the 68,328 to the 81,528?
Can you tell me what page you're talking about?
Page 2, 51103.
What page?
Oh, this is
Page 2.
Page 2?
your budget.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm looking at the green one.
Yeah, it's
Should
still
be the
page
same
2.
page,
That's,
right?
yeah, that's the
The
same.
pages are the same.
Yeah, those pages
Should
are
be
the
So
the
we're
same.
looking at aid to the mayor,
Two positions,
right, it went from 68,328 to 81,528.
right.
Yeah,
So
professional
could you just
supervisors.
walk us through how we got from that to the other?
So that is not actually what was budgeted. What was budgeted last year was the 81,528. I'm not sure why it comes up that way. It's always been, I have 3 positions in the mayor's office. All of them make this, the same amount of money, 47,640. So that must be an error, the 68 number, if that's what you're referring to.
Well, that's all I had.
Yeah, no, I know.
No,
I'm not
it's-
saying it's your fault.
No, the 68 is partial year, sorry, it's not the full year. I mean,
I'm looking at the budget.
No, she's looking at the budgeted column, and I'm not sure why it says budgeted, but it was budgeted at 81,528.
Oh,
All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
I know why, because we transferred some elsewhere, but anyway.
Okay. Let me see, next on my list is Counselor Lee.
Could I answer?
Oh, yeah, sure, Bellamy, yes, go
One
ahead.
of Linda's questions?
Yeah, fire
And
away.
then can I talk a little bit?
Yeah.
Which response to what you said? First of all, with regard to what.
By the
we're-
way, we're gonna give the whole, there's gonna be a whole Bellamy section
That's all
going
right.
here.
This is not
I'm
about
just
me.
trying to have a, keep it moving on the Alex section.
With regard to what we're going to spend this year, my projection is we're going to come in very much on budget. I just looked at the April year-to-date numbers. I did a projection of year-end. We come within $400,000 of being right on budget at
Okay.
year-end. And given errors in projection, I think we're going to be, we are so very close right now. We're trying to find money to move out of unused space to solve other problems. But we should be bang on at the end of the year,
All right.
2015.
Thank you.
Bellamy, could you
Now-
also give us the monthly budget reports through April, the end of April? Those usually come out the end of May.
That was sent out, that was sent out.
All right, could
And I
you-
sent you the electronic
Yeah,
version.
yeah, just email me the
I
electronic
did.
version.
I sent it to, I sent it to Ryan
Oh, okay.
per
Then
your
we'll have to get it
request
to
end of
Ryan.
last week.
All right, we'll have to get that
So
from
you
Ryan
got,
then.
you got it.
Kevin, on that, is there a way that we could have that online so the people at home could see exactly?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
You know, how transparent what we're spending? the
Sure.
city- Is that possible to put that online?
Because why that's helpful too is you have, yeah, it's helpful too because it has all the transfers in the year
Right.
too, so.
So
that's-
put monthly statements online.
Yeah, we in the finance committee used to get every, department exactly what they were spending.
Month by month, yeah.
month by month. I would like to see that online.
Yeah, I can talk to whoever runs the website.
Put it up on the city's website.
PDF.
Okay, go ahead, Bellamy, you were gonna continue with some other thoughts.
I just want to talk big picture about the budget, because that's how Linda started. And the way I look at it is to start with the Chinese curse, which is may you live in interesting times, and we are living in interesting times. You can talk about a lot of reasons why we have this interesting times, but I think it all boils down to the coal plant, which was once worth $40 million on the books of Holyoke in terms of assessed value. I think I'm right, Tony? And is now down to somewhere under, to the equivalent of under $5 million, throwing off a little bit of tax revenue, whereas it used to throw off $1.6 million in tax revenue. That's what's really causing our problem, our tax limit. And if you want to concretize that and really identify with it, you realize that $1.6 million in taxes is the equivalent of the taxes on 550 private homes, or 1/2 of Ward 7A. So losing that coal plant was like losing half of a ward. I mean, it is a huge loss to the city, and that's why we're in the problem we're in. So Linda's right. We are trying to use duct tape and chewing gum and so forth to get us through a couple of bad years. One was last year, where we threw free cash at a budget problem. We didn't solve the problem. We said, take 2 aspirin and see me in the morning, and basically that's how you balanced the budget last year, by transferring $2.5 million worth of free cash. You didn't solve the problem, you didn't cut the budget. So we've done a lot more cutting the budget this year, but we still haven't solved the problem completely. So, but we're trying, and we're trying to get Holyoke through another bad year. Now, I'm the optimist, and I believe the problem's gonna stop in 2017. Why? Because look at all the properties, all the things that are gonna come onto the tax rolls next year. Somewhere between $5 and $10 million worth of Gary Rome, somewhere around $5 million of Marcotte. I don't know how much the Chestnut Street apartments are. I don't know how many millions the new hotels are that are going up in wherever that old hotel was, near the mall. There are various buildings downtown that are being retrofitted, and businesses are moving in and investing in them. But that could be $10 to $20 million of assessed value. Am I wrong, Tony? And how much, and that will transfer into a lot of taxes, so.
Public can't hear Tony, so.
Okay. So I'm optimistic about next year. The problem is getting through this year. But, you know, so far, we have a deficit we're showing of $4 million, which is actually less than the deficit was last year, because last year's deficit was not honest, as I say. It didn't have enough snow in it, it didn't have enough overtime in it, it didn't have enough legal fees in it. It was understated. So we're starting with a lower deficit. We've identified a path to cure at least 2/3 of it with, yeah, it's free cash, but at least we're curing it with tax titles and one-time income. And we have identified a way of collecting some additional money to put the hole in the plug in the dike to fill the rest. So yes, it's tough times, but on the other hand, we're getting through it, and you know, times will get better.
Let me ask you on the thing of the times getting better. One thing that I did hear, and it hasn't come our way yet, but I just heard through the grapevine that there's some proposal to maybe be forwarding a tax incremental financing agreement for the new Gary Rome project. And if that's the case, that's gonna throw out your rosy next year picture, because it would be 100% tax exempt, and then it's gonna be 80%, 60, 40. I mean, it'll be like 5 years until we get that money. And I just let it be known that the TIF program is designed to give incentives for business to relocate and expand in Holyoke. But where they're going to do it anyways, I mean, which I don't think there's anybody saying that Gary Rome never conditioned anything on getting a tax incremental financing agreement, that we supported that for the purposes of getting new jobs and new taxes in the city. It's gonna be a real tough sell to me if that proposal ends up coming this way, when we're in the type of financial condition that we are, to have a tax incremental financing agreement. So I don't know if that's in the brew, but I'm hearing that from around, and I just
will-
wanted to put
yeah,
that out
Yeah, I
there.
will say I haven't seen a proposal.
Okay.
No one has talked to me about a proposal.
All right.
And I have no plans to forward you a proposal.
Very good, excellent, then we put that to rest. Let's see, next on my lineup was Counselor Lisi.
I'm all set.
You're all set. Counselor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. President, and just like to retract my statements from earlier about a budget, supplemental budget. I think it's more of a corrections to the existing budget, so I wouldn't worry about the 45 days, not that my opinion matters that much. But, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you and Bellamy if you had a hand in this or co-hand in this to some of the interesting new things that you've added to the budget. The revenue part, estimated revenues, I know it's only not part of the actual budget, but certainly it's nice to have them within the department to know what some departments have brought in. I find some of your projections are under your column, Mr. Mayor, as projected revenues very interesting, and I hope they come true because it's part of balancing the budget, and it certainly would make sense if our departments could live up to those revenue projections. And Bellamy, I agree with you so much that the coal plant is what put us in a predicament in terms of the ceiling. You know, we hit the ceiling because of the coal plant. You know, home sales are down, home sales are going up. You know, it's going to take time, but new growth is something that will always help us bridge the gap in terms of lost revenue. To me, it's always a difficult time. I don't find this evening as a night to debate, but rather to ask questions and to get a general feel for the budget. And the way I view the budget at the moment, and we do have to balance it, but it's a budget of hope. The hope that we can continue to provide the services to this community that our citizens want. We can often talk about affordability, we can often talk about the tax rates and the sewer rate and everything that is necessary to provide the revenue, but the hope is we are providing services from public safety to DPW. I mean, Holyoke is one of the few communities that picks up trash in such a phenomenal way. One of the few communities that I was in Chicopee during a couple of storms this year, and people said, you know, one lady came from Worcester and said, I can't even drive in Worcester, and yet I drove into Chicopee and Holyoke, and I could have walked anywhere I wanted to. The streets were so plowed and so clean. We need to provide those services at the best cost we can, and I think the way we do it is working together to figure it out. There's a couple of things I did want to talk about in general. Mayor, the one thing that's not in the budget, I understand it, is there's no capital outlay in the budget. There is a revamping of the capital outlay 5-year projections, but it's with very little exceptions. It's not part of the budget.
It's not part of the general fund budget. It will be so I did present a 5-year capital budget to the council separate from this, with a separate cover letter. I think you received that. And under the 2015 column, FY16 column in that capital budget I proposed, everything in bold is what I'm proposing to spend in FY16 via free cash or via proposal from stabilization. We added in, there's about a $1 million, it'll come to $1 million that we'll need either from free cash or stabilization to afford my proposal. And above the 1 million, there's about $2.7 million worth of capital investments that will be made that are already covered by CBDG or Chapter 90 funds. But of the $1 million, in a nutshell, about $100,000 for servers and IT, $175,000 for a new refuse truck, $450,000 for trash bins for all residents of the city to modernize the way the trash is picked up, similar to what some of other communities are doing. An additional litter vacuum, and additional vehicle for the DPW. Most of it is DPW, and then also 3 additional police cruisers for the police department at a cost of $126,000. So that'll be presented separately.
Okay. Bellamy, we talked about tax tiles, and I'll ask these questions more in detail later down the road, but, and we have talked about the tax tile, selling tax tiles in the past, but the person who will buy a tax title for the purpose of making money by going after the collection itself, they're gonna want properties that are in a position for reuse. They're gonna want properties that may be part of our urban renewal plan, maybe part of, something that we can sell, even though we won't gain back the money that's owed. How do you distinguish what tax titles are sold, and how do you control that? Is there a time limit?
We do several things. First of all, we are going to sell tax titles in a bundle, so people can't cherry pick and say, well, I want this one, but I don't want that one. So it's either, take them all or take none. So that's the first point. The second point is that as we've developed lists of potential tax titles, we've circulated those to different departments in the city to make sure that, from the lawyers, that they are not already in some kind of tax foreclosure process, to the planning department to make sure they're not part of some grander urban development plan. And we remove things that are necessarily, should be removed. But we end up with a bunch of titles that will all be sold together as one to a professional company. So it's because we're not selling individual properties, we're not gonna go to an auction where some abutter wants to get the next door neighbor's house for a cheap price. We're gonna go to a professional company that wants to buy them all and will, is looking to make that money on the 16% interest.
Other than the professional company knowing, or perhaps knowing that the property is leverage, they don't own the property. Eventually, the city has.
No, they only own the title to what is owed.
But the property is tied up, because once we sell the property or foreclose on it,
Yeah.
everything goes away.
They would have to go through the foreclosure process if the underlying owner does not redeem the title.
Okay, gentlemen, help us out. Unemployment compensation. Last year, $450,000, I believe $360,000 related to the schools. This year, we can put a maybe bigger question mark on that number from the schools, unknown at this moment in time, but certainly something we all have to be leery about. The Human Resource Personnel Department has been preparing a report. I'm not sure why it's taking so long to get it to us, but to identify some of those areas, especially in the schools, because it's a little bit out of our control. But my two questions are, do we have a handle on unemployment for this coming year, what's projected in this budget? And Bellamy, I've asked this question in front of you before, is whatever is expended out of the schools considered net school spending? All right, first questions first. Do we have a handle on
One at a time.
unemployment compensation for this upcoming year?
We're budgeting approximately the same as we would normally budget for unemployment. Not this year's amount, but I believe it's around $450,000, I can look.
Yeah, that's right, 450.
For next year, which is sort of a historical number. We're assuming that there's not gonna be another mass exodus from the schools.
Do you
as
know
there
what
was
we've
this
actually
year.
spent this year?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Okay.
You want to know what I project we're going to spend by year end? $970,000, because I just calculated it. We've
By
spent about
fiscal year end?
We've spent about $880 so far. We have bills for. Not all the bills have been paid yet, because I'm waiting for a transfer from the finance committee. But we've got bills for
Okay.
$880, and I'm expecting with another couple of months we'll be at $970 by year end.
We budgeted $450,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because the schools, apparently at this time of year, the schools didn't tell you last year that they were gonna do this, so.
No, they told us, and we brought it to the attention of the personnel department. We brought it to your attention at one time, not that it's your problem. And we begged Dr. Paez not to be careful on the type of layoffs that he was doing. I understand what he was doing, and I do understand the approach to what he was changing within the school system itself. But it cost us some unnecessary unemployment composition for teachers who collected over last summer. That's the report that we're waiting for.
Yeah, and
It's-
that
it's-
report, by the way, was sent to Todd on May 7th, just before I went on vacation. Apparently, he never got it, so I gave it to Ryan again last Friday. I don't know what happened to it, but the report does exist, and it should be in the hands of Todd right now. because Ryan was gonna make sure he's there. Ask Ryan, because I gave it to him, I hand-delivered it to him last, I don't know, Friday? Yeah, it's in an envelope with your name on it, so.
So our final number for unemployment this year is gonna be closer to 900,000,
970,000.
okay? And you're expecting a transfer from where?
I have submitted a transfer I submitted some time ago a
I
transfer
thought that was,
to the, Finance Committee.
I
It's
thought that was
pending.
at the request, I don't wanna say you, Bellamy, of either Mr. Judge or Bellamy, that was shot down.
No, it's tabled.
Table, yeah.
Coming from several different, it's not coming from free cash, it's coming from several different line items.
Right, see what,
For 40, however,
right,
there was a request for that information, which was not received at our full meeting. So the motion was to table it by the group, of which we still have not received that information. So it's coming on Friday.
or last Friday, yeah,
That request came in months ago.
right.
So if we got it Friday, it's
Okay. We spent it, we better figure out how to pay it.
Well, what the schools will tell you is that they budgeted $5 million for benefits. The mix has actually changed. They're gonna spend more on unemployment by hundreds of thousands than they expected. But because they don't have all these people on the payroll, they're saving a lot in medical and health, a lot, all those other benefits. So in the end, they're gonna spend only $5 million on benefits.
But are they paying the city unemployment compensation?
They pay the city $5 million for benefits, which includes all of that. So, yes,
So that $5 million you're referring to is part of the net school formula?
yes,
So, but we're
It's-
spending $900,000 in net school, in unemployment, 500,000, 400,000 unexpected.
correct. But we're also saving in health insurance and life insurance and other things because there are fewer school employees. So that's this transfer that's in the works. Take it out of health insurance and put it in unemployment.
Glad you got a handle on the school budget, because you're the first person I've met in 36 years that can say that so confidently.
I've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out because it is a Gordian knot,
Yeah.
so to speak.
It's,
It took me a while to figure it out.
yeah. Does unemployment compensation, dollar for dollar, become part of net school spending?
I can't say dollar for dollar because we deduct from them a total amount. So if they underspend it, if we underspend it, we still get that $5 million. If we don't spend all of it on unemployment and health insurance and so forth for the schools, we still get the $5 million from the schools.
They actually
'Cause it's a
turn
formula.
$5 million in cash over to the city?
It's a deduction from the money
Right.
we get from the state, but
The net
yes,
school
for
spending
benefits, correct.
formula. We don't see the money.
No, it doesn't,
right.
the money doesn't change hands, it's a deduction.
Could you provide us maybe a breakout of all that and maybe a sheet?
I will be happy to try to.
And then this way, we can just see how the funds flow goes through of
Yep.
revenue, and then these credits, and then what was, because I assume you use some sort of algorithm to determine the net school spending amount that appears here that we're asked to fund.
Well, it starts with what does the state say we have to spend? And then
Yeah.
you back into all these other things from the
Right.
state.
So we
Correct.
just like to understand the calculus that
It'll
goes
be
into that.
useful for me to do that.
Yeah,
because
thank
I
you.
still try to understand this.
I think I've focused on one area, Mr. President, and I think we need to focus on all the benefits if that's the way it's done as an overall, you're telling us that health insurance, FICA, other things, all are taken out of the city budget and the schools give us $5 million?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So,
And who's
yes.
responsible for balancing that? Your office or?
That's what I'm saying, it doesn't exactly balance. We take the $5 million and we have to hope it comes out right. I don't know what happens if we spend more than that. That I don't know. I'm ignorant of how that works.
Well,
It seems to be coming out just right
I
this
would
year.
think if we know what happened this year, what we're trying to do is correct it for next year. And I would think that's the way the formula works, because we don't know what unemployment is gonna be until it happens.
Right.
We can project it. We don't know what all the benefits are gonna be until we know how many employees were on board for the full year. And we don't know what the savings are likewise. But if we don't balance it at the end of the year and correct the number either way, I don't think we're doing justice to what we're looking at as a budget and what we call net school spending. What really I'm getting at, though, what scares me more, and I don't think it's this topic for tonight, but it's a budget topic, is with the receiver being hired today, who can eliminate positions at will, from the superintendent down to principals, down to teachers, you know, what are we looking at in terms of, if I understand Lawrence, they saw 25% people left the school system or were laid off the school system, which is where the unemployment comes in.
Yeah, so we've been, I know Bellyman and I have met a few times with, along with Chris Regan from the school department, with folks from DESI, some of their finance folks, as they are putting together their budget for the next school year. We've made it very clear, I know we had a conversation about talking to the commissioner and his staff about the importance of not giving layoff notices with the intent of rehiring a high percentage of those folks, given the impact it would have on the city side of the budget. They've made that clear. They've also sent a message that a vast majority of educators in the city will be getting a notice within the next few weeks with what's called an intent to retain. And so they've made it very clear that the vast majority of teachers will be retained. There are a percentage of teachers that are what's called non-PTS, so non-professional teacher status, that could be impacted to some extent. But they don't expect the amount of changes they did have last year. There was, I want to say, a $5 to $6 million deficit in the school department last year that needed to be addressed. They're looking at a closer to a $2 million deficit in the school department this year. And they are looking to carry over as much money unexpended this year to next year, which they traditionally do to help mitigate the number of potential layoffs. They're looking to carry over potentially upwards of $1 million is the number that I heard from Chris most recently. So we're trying to mitigate that as much as we can.
The money, I would believe that for the most part, the money they can carry over is not the city part of the budget, rather the Chapter 70 and grants and things that they
Right,
can
yeah.
encumber, and which is a wonderful luxury to have as a major department that they are. Are we gonna owe any contracts, the superintendent's contract beyond this year? Any principals, if they are let go, we're gonna owe their contracts? Will the schools be paying that?
Yeah, that will be a responsibility of the school department. Again, we expect the vast majority, if not all principals, to still be principals in the fall.
And with the lack of local accountability, with the school committee being stripped of their budgetary powers, if I'm saying that correctly, we have a cap as to what we can do for net school spending?
There is what, we will be told what exactly minimum net school spending is, and then there are those expenses above and beyond minimum net school spending, charter school reimbursement and transportation, that will still be on the hook for, and we'll be reviewing those numbers between now and the fall in terms of their plans. It's a little behind, previous years, given the transition, but we are reviewing those numbers.
I believe the law itself says the statute talks about a 95% cap if we're not gonna have local accountability. Charter schools have no accountability of the dollars that are spent on a charter school. I have nothing against charter schools, but it's our tax dollars that nobody accounts for it until something goes wrong. And right now, we have no accountability for the way the monies are gonna be spent in the school for the next fiscal year. No local accountability.
Yeah, they are mandated by state law, regardless of receivership, to have a public hearing on the budget, so they will still have a public hearing on the budget later this month, although it's not a traditional public hearing where the school committee will approve the budget as they have in the past.
The city council, the mayor, with the exception of the mayor being the chairperson of the school committee, has no line item accountability for the school budget, and I understand that. But with the school committee not having line item accountability, the accountability comes down to the receiver, period.
Yep.
Who looks over the receiver?
Commissioner?
So fiscal accountability is out the window. I'll stop right there. That's my comment,
Yeah, you
not a
could put,
question.
you could put, I don't know if you're asking for an answer or not.
The- Well, Bellamy, are you going over the recap sheet when you speak later? Okay, well, I don't want to,
Why don't we save that?
I want
part
to take a
till-
break,
till
yeah,
Bellamy.
not a break.
Why
Mr.
don't we
President,
wrap
but
up my part at some point when, I'm not saying you have to wrap it up now, but, and then
Right.
we can get into the individual.
We would appreciate, we did invite the school committee, this receiver, and I sent a personal invitation to the State Secretary of Education to come on the 8th, to come and address the school budget, and then we had some questions, regarding, for example, we recently, there was a contract, I remember that the city council had to approve, because it was greater than 3 years, I believe it was 5 years, the contract regarding Dean Vocational, and that contract. So now that that has been terminated, is there still municipal liability for the years that, the receiver has elected not to retain the Project Grad?
No, that was a mutually agreed upon, departure from Project Grad.
Okay, so everybody's just walking their separate ways, okay, that's good. But it would be helpful if you could use, any of your powers of persuasion to have somebody come, maybe this new gentleman, that was announced today, or someone from their staff as well, to come to just give us some finance numbers around
Yeah,
this net school
I mean, I would say
spending.
every department head that worked for Dr. Paez now works for the receiver. So Chris Regan, their director of finance, is still the director of finance at this time.
Okay.
And she's been working closely with Bellamy and I on their numbers, and so she could give an accurate picture
Okay.
on behalf of the new superintendent, new receiver.
All right, so we'll have to make sure Chris Regan gets invited, as well. All right, next up was Gordon. Counselor Alexander? Yep.
Thank you. Alex Bellamy, thank you. Great, but, I mean, I love the new layout. It's much more interpretable. Couple of quick questions. One is, I didn't see a revenue line on the DPW on the refuse collection. There was no revenue for recycling revenue. Is that something that we could see?
I honestly don't,
I
no,
think they
it's
all go
probably
in
a
free
local
cash.
receipt, it's probably just not on their page. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't tell you where that falls. But
If
I
somebody
didn't
could
put it
chase
on the
down that
page-
number and put it on the page, that would be
I
helpful.
can, so you want to know, what exactly do you want to know, just so I can write it down?
Just recycling revenues on the revenue
Oh,
section for
okay.
that page. I mean, it's very clear, like, if you look at the building department or something, there's a really nice breakdown of the revenue, even though it all gets dumped into free cash, I understand that, but nevertheless, it shows where some of that free cash is coming from. That would just be a helpful thing to see, particularly when you've got variable support for increasing expenditure on recycling programs and things like that. The $1 million or so under the police department line for the Quinn bill, that I'm assuming is the 50/50. We're funding the city portion plus we're funding the state portion. Both of those are lumped together into that
Correct.
$990-something thousand.
Yes.
And they are exactly the same, right? I can just chop that in half and see the two numbers. Is that
Yep.
safe? Yeah.
Yep.
I just have one other question. You mentioned, Bellamy, the coal plant was originally $40 million, I think, in asset value.
In the equivalent of asset
So-
value,
so-
according to
Sort of assessed value,
Tony,
that's what I'm
yes,
trying to say,
right.
okay.
But its taxes are calculated on a usage formula, so it's much more complicated than that, of course.
Right. What percentage of, and maybe because of that complexity, this isn't an easy question to answer, but what percentage of the total industrial tax base did that represent at 40 million? And Tony, if you've got the number, feel free to answer it, and if Bellamy, you could just repeat it into a mic for the rest of the people.
I do not have the number.
No, but if Tony does, if you could just repeat it for us.
He'll look that up.
And with, that answer can come in a few minutes, I don't care, and that was the last of my questions, thank you.
Okay, great. Counselor Bresnahan?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming down. I just got a couple quick questions. It was earlier brought up about the in-state travel for the mayor's office of $3,000. I'm not concerned about the number, but I noticed that many departments have an in-state travel line item, and you said that $3,000 was not used for the mayor's office. Department heads used, so I'm assuming what you're saying is that if someone in the department has in-state travel, the request goes to your office, or I'm sorry, the request comes out of their budget. But if a department head does in-state travel to be reimbursed, their request goes to your office.
That's accurate. It's also not all departments that have in-state travel, and so if a department head requests to go to a conference or for mileage reimbursement, for let's say it's a hearing in Boston or something like that, they'll put in a request. They have to, and the out-of-state travel is a different, same thing with the out-of-state travel. It's not a mayor's office, it's for all of the city employees.
Are you comfortable with that coming, I mean, just to take something off your plate, are you comfortable, I mean, if someone from a different department head's going to a different, doing in-state travel, are you okay with the fact that why wouldn't you have them put that into their budget as opposed to having them put that into your budget?
I think it's good here, it allows for accountability, because by law I have to approve the travel, and so it helps us track that, and so I would be a little uncomfortable if that was to go somewhere else.
Thank you. If the ordinance that was just if the ordinance that was just recently presented to the ordinance committee that went through with respect to the monetary reclassifications of certain positions of the 5317 are looking at getting a raise. I'm assuming the numbers are gonna, these numbers that are presented tonight, there's gonna be, that'll be changed.
Yeah, if it was to pass tomorrow and you would assume it would be in the budget, I think the cost of it was just, what was it, about $20,000?
42.
42?
42?
42.
Can't remember. 42,000. Yeah. But it would be a net increase of 20 because some of based on the study, was negotiated into union contracts.
Have you,
And it doesn't include, and that's just by approving this study. That doesn't include cost of living adjustments if we actually wanted to provide merit-based raises or cost of living adjustments to those employees above and beyond the minimum market.
for the rest of those members in that collective bargaining group, I know it's not a collective bargaining group, but let's just call it that.
Yeah.
The other 53 people, is there a game plan or a plan for how, what your thoughts are on perhaps or giving them a little compensation for, I mean, many of them have been here for years. I know this may have been brought up, but I'm not looking for I'm not looking for a long-term answer to this question, but yes, no. Have you thought about what's a long-term answer for some of those other people that are in that classification that are not receiving a raise, that
Yes.
have not received the raise for years?
Yeah, we've thought about how to address that. The whole point of doing non-union employees was that there hasn't been a fair compensation system for those employees. Many of them are at their max, and there's no way to provide merit raises or cost of living adjustments. And their colleagues in the fire, police, DPW, every other union in the city have seen raises, while the non-union employees haven't seen any. And so how do we empower department heads also to reward, good work, and also a general cost of living adjustment? And that's what we've discussed in the ordinance.
I noticed that the DPW, I got two more thoughts and then I'll be done. I noticed that the DPW, with respect to the snow overtime is $120,000 and the snow removal services is $400,000, which just, so that's $520,000. Realizing that they spent $820,000, just throwing numbers out here, and I know no one has a crystal ball as to what the weather's gonna be like, but when I hear the term a realistic budget, with all due respect, I'm just trying to gauge whether or not, do we think that that's realistic? If they spent $220,000 last year and you're looking for $600,000 this year, and we just transferred $375,000, again, knowing that no one could predict the snow that we would be having, and I apologize, that's on page 32.
Yeah, I think for that, we looked at trends over at least a 5-year period, so we wanted to come up with a realistic number that way. We have increased it, obviously, a few $100,000 to prevent what happened this year. Obviously, I can't promise tonight that that's going to be enough. We hope it will be. We're confident it will be. And given the increase, we think we'll be in good shape. And also in DPW, Bill's very effective he doesn't spend all of his line items, and sometimes things come up, so we're able to find the money within the DPW budget of unexpended funds throughout the year. We never hope to have to come to the council for additional funding. We always try to look at the budget first,
Could have just said, we never look forward to coming to the council and said, period. Last,
We're nice.
I know, I'm just teasing, I'm just teasing.
You were a department head once, how it is.
I know, but I never used to like to come here. Just to throw this out there, I mean, has there been, and again, we don't need a dissertation, or I won't give one tonight. the Quinn bill, is that, as far as you're concerned, in your opinion as the mayor, it's a done deal as far as, there was talks, we had talked about whether or not there was to be a contract and this sort of thing and that, whether or not we can negotiate it through them. I mean, we just basically,
Yeah,
from a legal standpoint, you're willing to say we're gonna give them the $990,000 to cover the Quinn bill for this next fiscal year.
yeah, it's the fourth year I funded it 100%. The assumption is it'll disappear over time. It doesn't take effect on new employees. And I know, there is some pending legislation in the state to have the state fund their 50%. I doubt that will go through, but again, I think for contractual reasons, we've seen some appellate board decisions that have all gone against cities and towns who have defunded the 50%, and I think it's something that the city should do.
And a thought, not a question, and I know everyone that works at City Hall will not be happy with this, but we should think about when we, on holidays, just be mindful of the closures that we have, because obviously, as you know, that some departments we can't close down, so there's that overtime cost that has to come into effect. And believe me, I'm sure everybody loves those extra couple days off, but, with a tight budget, that might be one way to just kind of keep a little dough to you and a little dough to the City Hall with not having, the day, 2 days before, the day after. Typically, in some jobs, you get, the day after Christmas and that's it. You get Christmas
keep
Day
that
off
in
and the
mind.
day after. But I know everybody loves it. I'm not complaining because I don't work here. I wish when I did work here, you might have been the mayor, because we would have probably gotten more days off than the previous administration gave. But just something to think about, a way to kind of maybe save a couple bucks here and there, that's all.
right, thank you.
Mayor, thank you very much for coming down.
Alex, I wanted to ask you about in the clerk's office, the ordinance codification money. I was under the impression that was gonna make its way back to the budget. I believe we had a hearing at one point. I believe, we were under the impression you were gonna put that back. I don't know if that's just an oversight. Do you think we could get that 5,000 back for the ordinance codification?
I would defer to the council on that. I would just lay out the facts. In terms of the $5,000, we could either choose to do the $5,000 or we can choose to do this and save $5,000. So our web manager, along with the law department, have created a real-time ordinance website, link on the website. The law department's offered to update that so that the city clerk and her staff don't have to use any of their time to update this, but instead of having it updated every 6 months, this would be updated. It'd be Holyoke specific. Eileen Pooler and the law department have folks working on this over the last year. If the city council wants to communicate to me officially that they want to spend $5,000 on what my opinion is we don't need, then I'm willing to do that. But I do think we've been able to create a new system at no cost to the city that is updated in real time. So if the city council passes an ordinance, changed tomorrow night, by the end of the week, anybody in the public who goes online to check it, it would be reflected. When the current system is, it takes 6 months at least to update the system, and we thought that was an important concern.
Okay. I think our pretty strong opinion at the time was that we asked you, I suppose we could put that in writing to do that. But I thought the takeaway from that conversation that we had was that we were gonna do it. The obvious reasons is we've been most displeased with the way it's been since October of 2013 when we got dropped our subscription to MuniCode. Number two is we feel that they verify and certify that everything is accurate. They also provide an online system that is that's really excellent in being done. I have yet to see the product that it's just not accessible to us, what's currently being done. Moreover, if there's any spare time that Eileen Pooler and company have, then they need to go fix the current website. They don't have any spare time to work on our ordinances. They've got a full-time project fixing all the defects that currently exist in the city website, and their time should be spent there. So I would ask that that the money be put back. I think we'll ask for that request, but I know the clerk's office feels very strongly as well that they would like that put back.
We can take care of that.
All right, we appreciate that. Next up is Councilor Peter Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Bellamy, and thank you, Mayor, for coming down and sort of clearing this up for us and trying to put a picture of this budget that is sort of understandable, Bellamy. We really brought that up tonight. it's something that we have to work with, and it has been a tough couple of years, and I know it's going to take some time. I'm optimistic too, but I think it might not be till 2018 or 2019 before things start to turn around for us here in the city. Mayor, the health care cost, and that's something we can't control, and they keep going up. And I know we have currently a wellness committee in the city that's working on trying to get people fit and stay healthy and stay, keep the costs down. Is there anything that, I think the previous year there was it went down, the healthcare cost, didn't that?
Yeah, so while it is a cost that we have to spend, we actually have been successful in keeping the costs low. So we have brokers that work directly with the city, and then we have the Section 19 committee that works with us. I will say, so last year we negotiated a more affordable plan with Health New England, and we also have Blue Cross Blue Shield. We did a pretty comprehensive education plan to try to have as many employees migrate from Blue Cross Blue Shield to Health New England because the plan is cheaper from the city's perspective as well. And so we changed a little bit the percentage, the contribution per employee, per percentage to try to incentivize movement to Health New England. And that went really successful, so we were able to save some money in health insurance last year. At the onset of this process, we started the process with Blue Cross Blue Shield, not too happy with that, and sort of were reluctant at first to want to keep doing business with the city because so many folks had moved to Health New England. We ended up getting them back in the game, so we still work with both companies. We started with a potential 20% increase, which would have been a huge increase for the city and the employees, and we actually were able to negotiate that down to about a 2% increase in health insurance. And so while this number fluctuates to some extent, we have a number in there that will get us through the end of the fiscal year, and we're optimistic that more employees will continue to migrate from Blue Cross to Health New England. But we were really proud of the fact that we were able to go from 20% down to 2% through negotiations over the last 6 months.
Okay, thank you. And on the question on the fire department, and I think you made some cuts there with the fire department. Can you explain the talk about what we did this past year with staffing as far as keeping some engines down or browning out? Could you sort of explain that so we have a better understanding what's going to happen this year?
Yeah, so we've been working with the fire chief on this, and he can talk a little bit more in detail on that. We are budgeted at 80 firefighters this last fiscal year. We're down to 71 at this point, and so the department is planning to hire 9 new firefighters. They've always requested more than that. We think the 80 is sufficient. We also, overtime has been an issue in the fire department for many years, and so we've been working to reduce that. So the fire department is fully staffed. There should be no concerns about that. And the brownout is a gradual non-use of one engine in the city. Obviously, when there's an incident, we'll call people in to do that. But there are people at all stations at all times. We had a payroll several months ago where over a 2-week period, overtime in the fire department was about $1,500. It was the lowest it's ever been in the city, and so we looked at why that was. And so, for example, if there's 4 firefighters on a apparatus and one calls in or uses a sick day or a personal day that morning, we're not automatically calling in someone else and paying them overtime. And so looking at trends, and we've been able to reduce overtime in the fire department by doing that. And so then the mandate to the fire chief really was, look at that low cost of overtime in that 2-week period, let's multiply that by 26 pay periods and then stick to that. And I think that's been successful. It's been something that we've been able to see a reduction there that we want to be able to maintain.
Last point I want to make is the police cars. And I know that the police department usually changes over. We get about 6 cars. And I think something came through this year to get 6 cars. Those in our committee. And of course, there was no money.
Yep.
You state there's just going to be 3 cars this coming year, this fiscal year?
We've already ordered 3 cars with money we found in the existing budget. And so that was $126,000. Those were already approved absent intervention from the finance committee or the council. And then the additional 3 cars that were requested to make it a total of 6 will be presented via different means through the FY16 capital plan later this summer. And so we'll get to a total of 6, but 3 are on their way.
Okay. And finally, you talked about the stabilization fund, some kind of a program you're going to have or
a usage policy.
Usage policy for that, so that we don't actually take that unless it's dire needs for the city to use that money?
It outlines a number of different justifications to use the policy. It was made in collaboration with the outside auditors, and also it was replication to some extent of surrounding communities' stabilization fund policy. If you need another copy, let me know. We could send that to you. It also puts in practice, and so if you use stabilization for certain things, when you do your bond ratings and or whatnot, for that not to affect the bond rating, it's really important that the city have a codified fiscal policy to point to, that we're not making a decision based on assumption. We're making a decision based on a policy that's been presented to the council and approved by the administration. And so that was the point of having a written down policy that we'll be able to use in the future that we didn't have in the past.
And I know it's tough to put money in when we're struggling with our budget, but there is something that you state in your letter that you're going to try to put some money into the stabilization fund on a yearly basis, or?
It's always an ideal that we love to do that. In the policy, there is an ambition to put a percentage in on an annual basis, and so it's outlined in the policy as to what the ambition should be. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, with respect to the stabilization policy, what's your intention with that with us? Is this something that you're looking for us to have a meeting and a discussion, and is this just something you're presenting to us, or like what action are you suggesting we take with that?
I don't think I'm expecting any specific action on it.
Okay.
Maybe just receiving it.
Okay.
At this point.
And on the capital budget, and your capital spending plan, is that informational? That's not something that we're required at this time to take a vote on?
Informational at this point.
Okay.
At the point at which I actually identify a source of funds based on a proposal of expenditures, then it'll require city council involvement.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is if you could take a look into it for me, or maybe through the law department, is regarding the Creative Arts Center building rental money. And I know it is still on the trajectory downward, and this year it's 28,000. But, after kind of reviewing the East Hampton situation about how they ceased funding for a private organization that they were funding, they stated that it was not compliant with the law as the justification as to why they could no longer give a amount allocation in their budget. I think it was like $20,000 for a food pantry that they had been supporting for quite a number of years. And we are giving $28,000 in direct aid to a private organization. Can we just double check to make sure that that's legal? I mean, I'm curious to find out now, in light of that decision in East Hampton, whether direct aid to a private organization is in fact legal with municipal funds. And I just think it's something that we should check into to make sure
We could verify it.
Okay.
My understanding is that it's legal, and it comes down to a different interpretation of the law.
Okay, all right. So, and I will speak to the law department as well on that. Hold on one second. I did have Counselor Alexander up next, and then Counselor Soto, then Counselor Bacon.
Thanks. Alex, just a quick follow-up on the Municode replacement system, web-based, whatever it is. Is that something that's ready? It's in use? It's a deep, dark secret, I think, to everybody in this room, so I'm just sort of wondering where we are with it.
Yeah, after we had conversation with particular counselors about it, I had gone back to the law department and Eileen as to what progress has been made on it, because I know a lot of work has gone into the construction of the new system. So I will have to check into that. My understanding is it's ready to go, or we wouldn't have zeroed out the Municode line item.
Because I think Municode's been zeroed out for a while now, and we have not had a replacement in place. And I think that's why there's frustration in this room, is we took away the old toy before we got the new toy. And if the new toy is ready, let's get a demo and let's see which one is better and make a decision. If it's not ready yet, then I think we need to go back to Municode, at least until.
Yeah, my understanding is it's ready, and if counselors are interested in having a presentation on it, we can make that happen.
I think absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
Counselor Soto.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mayor, for coming down. Question on page 8. Can you just give us a rundown on the officer, city solicitor? Like just one by one, please, on the employees. And the changes that were made to, like, there were DH20s last, and now there's DH21's the lowest now for pay.
Yep, so this is all this reflects the ordinance changes that the council passed during the last fiscal year. So we reclassified all of the positions and renamed all the titles. And so that's why it's different. So it was actually different titles. So we have three in the assistant solicitor, and then the associate. We no longer have staff attorneys. We have associate solicitors. The principal clerk has stayed the same, and that's pretty much the same. Before we had the first assistant, second assistant, staff attorneys, and then upon recommendation from Kara and the law department, they all came before ordinance and recommended a whole new way of
Yep.
structuring the department that was approved by the council as a whole.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah,
What I wanted to ask just on that, in that spirit, could you just address the 35,000 for the empty position?
Yeah, I just threw, I think this is the second year in a row it'll be budgeted. I think last year was budgeted at $20,000 for the solicitor line item. This year it's 35, so 50% of the 70,000 that was there the first few years. We have it there in the
Keep your options open.
in the chance that the something would happen there, but we're in no rush.
So you say you're no rush, Mayor. So Kara is the acting city solicitor as we speak?
Kara and Sarah co-manage the department. They both focus on different things, and
Under the city charter, Kara doesn't live in the city, so are we going to get somebody in there that,
well, she's not the acting solicitor. We have no official solicitor at this time.
we were told here the other day she was the acting city solicitor and you gave her a pay raise?
No, I've never signed the document appointing our acting solicitor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Let's see, get my checklist. Counselor Bacon.
Thank you. If we could go back to the stabilization policy for a minute, there was a reference in it that talks about a 5 to 10% maintenance in the stabilization fund relative to, I believe it was revenues. There was some comparison used that I think is a number we don't typically have. But given that percentage that you'll be looking at, how does our current stabilization total fit in that 5 to 10% window that you've referenced in your policy?
I'd have to look at the policy. I know there was an official recommendation from DOR that your stabilization fund be at least a certain percentage of your overall budget. And Holyoke exceeds that by a few percentage points.
So do either of you know what the percentage number is at
Yeah, I
this
know,
point?
I calculated all the numbers in the policy, and we fit within every one of them, but I just don't, off the top of my head, recall the specifics right now.
I think it's 12 or 13%.
12 to 13%? So assuming, I mean, that's a wide variance when you're looking at a policy and saying between 5 and 10% in a stabilization fund. I mean, that's a huge amount of money to vary. I mean, it almost looks like you're setting up a policy so that you have like, $5 more million that you can play with to spend. What is the goal of the policy? Is it to have access to be able to spend more of the stabilization fund? Or is the goal of it to preserve the stabilization fund? On the face of it, it looks like it's to be able to spend more of it.
No, I think it's, number one, preserving what we have. I think, given that the recommendation is officially 5 to 10, not created by us, but recommended by DOR, and given that we were over that threshold by a few percentage points, and per percentage of our budget, our stabilization fund is higher than most surrounding communities, which is a positive thing for us, and we've been able to maintain that. At the same time, there are critical investments that if we do need to go to stabilization for capital improvements to fund, for example, the $1 million of the capital plan for FY16 from stabilization, number one, I think it's a good use of the funds, and number two, we have a policy to back that up without going under that 10%.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselor McGivern.
Doesn't want to work. Two follow-ups. One, and you may have answered it, Mayor, but on page 2 in your budget, there was a question about those 2 aides.
Yep.
And I just looked in a prior budget going back to 2012, and that's the exact figure that 2 aides were paid, and that's the $81,528. But the follow-up I wanted to do was back to the fire department, if we could, real quick, and I'll ask in more detail when we have the chief in, is I get the 88 firefighters down to 80, but the budget reflects 72 firefighters in the little column here. Is that 72 reflective of the dollar figure that's in the budget, plus the grant money that pays for 8 more firefighters? And I know some are in the process of being hired and trained, but if you see what I'm saying, we're on page 20, there's 72 firefighters in what's proposed by the mayor.
Yep.
And the figure is 3,245,000.
Yep.
Is that just for 72?
That's for 72 firefighters.
Okay, so we're using the SAFER grant to pay for an additional 8 firefighters?
Yes.
Okay, the SAFER grant is gonna run out after this year,
Yes.
and we're gonna be responsible for all 80 firefighters for years to come unless,
We've been lucky that we've been able to continually get the SAFER grant, although it's not guaranteed.
and that's my point exactly, because if we don't find the revenue to replace the SAFER grant or any grant, when we use grants to pay for full-time positions, we, not only do we face, the potential of unemployment costs, but we have to find additional revenues to replace that. That's a lot of money. It's not just that line item, it goes down below into benefits and could have, future impacts on it. The fire department, we look at these budgets and we say we have X amount of firefighters, but to man, with the exception of, as Councilor Tomlin pointed out, the brownouts this year, to man the 7 pieces of apparatus we have, that's where a good chunk of the overtime monies was going, because we didn't have the firefighters. If we don't have a long-term plan of how many pieces of apparatus we're gonna keep online, is there a short-term plan to decide what apparatus to take offline permanently?
There's no plan to take any apparatus off permanently. We think there's a system in place that's rotational and maximizes service, and we've empowered the chief per his authority in the union contract to be able to make management decisions based on assignments and not backfilling overtime automatically.
Thank you.
All right, that was the last counselor that had signed up to speak. Bellamy?
I just want to answer Gordon's question about the coal plant. As I understand it from Tony, if he's still here, the coal plant has both industrial and personal property. And together, it represents 25% of the total industrial and personal property value for the city. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Did I get it right, Tony?
Yeah, when it was at the high of 40 million, it was about 25%. Right now, you're down to about 3%.
So, Tony, since you're standing there,
Just use the microphone, Tony. Respond.
what's the city worth? Total?
Right now,
Yeah.
we're at
$2 billion.
$2,049,000,000.
Okay.
Where is it?
There's a button on it.
You tap on it.
Yeah, it's on. So $2 billion, but total industrial, both real estate and personal property in the industrial category is only 160 million? So that 25% of that is 40 million?
No, at a high, when you asked the 40 million, with total industrial and personal property was about 160 million combined, 156
Ah, thank you.
million.
Okay, that's what I was missing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. So Bellamy, did you want to, I had asked for the additional supplementals to the recap sheet numbers that were provided to us, which you're going to give us. Let me see here. But other than that, I did have one question for Tony on that, but I see he just stepped out of the room. Actually, I was gonna ask about the overlay amount of $725,000.
My understanding is that's kind of a a standard amount that he starts with.
That's high, by my
And
estimations.
it may go down, but
Yeah,
There's a pending
We got some-
case with Verizon.
Oh.
And so that's 2 years' worth.
okay,
And so we're optimistic that the ruling will go in our favor and that money will then be put into the following fiscal year's free cash.
Okay.
But we can't necessarily.
better
count on
safe
that,
than
but
sorry.
Better safe than sorry on that one,
okay,
yeah.
got it. All right, very good. And I see, looks like we got 127,000 here for the Geriatric Authority's retirement. That's the gift that keeps on giving. And I anticipate that's gonna be giving us headaches into the future, because we have to continue to pay that. Anything unusual that you wanted to point out to us in the recap? I mean, once we get the further detail, I'm sure I'll probably have some questions, but
no, like I said,
anything you wanted to go over with that?
some of this is state, state grants or whatever, state cherry sheet, amounts. Right now it's based on the House budget. The Senate budget has since come out, but we still don't have a final budget. So, this will change as we get more information.
Okay.
Eventually we'll have a school budget number too, but
Right,
we don't
yeah,
have any of
'cause-
that, we don't have any of that yet. It's all too preliminary.
All right, super, yeah, because we definitely want to keep a close eye on that school one. Any questions for the auditor on page 3, his budget? If not, gentlemen, I think that's it for your section of it. All right, thank you very much, appreciate you coming in. Next up, I don't know if I have enough chairs, but I just assumed we can do a round robin of all 3, just to kind of speed things along for the treasurers. Yeah, or unless somebody doesn't mind standing at the rail, we have 2 available chairs.
I'm willing to move over.
So, the treasurer's office, we can welcome them in here to sit. And then, Tony and David, if you could just use the microphone as needed. We'll try and do all 3 of you guys at once. Oh, okay. Oh, we actually have one more chair if somebody wants to sit on. All right, welcome. So Tony, I did have one overlay question, but it seems like the mayor touched on it with the Verizon. I was gonna ask you about that. The 725, that was the estimate.
They appealed based on a taxation issue, saying
Just pull the microphone down closer to you.
they appealed on a taxation issue.
Is it on?
Okay. They appealed on a taxation issue.
Okay.
Claiming that it's unconstitutional, that they
Okay.
be taxed at the commercial rate. They wanted to be taxed at the non-split rate, which would be about $25 per thousand. And for the last 2 years, we've put the difference in the overlay. So if that goes through where we wouldn't have to pay, I mean, that's extra money that could be put back into
Sure.
the general fund, so.
And we're listing now, and the auditor's office is signing off on any of the pending cases, and you give that form that the DOR wanted, and there's no surprises, nobody, gee, this came out of left field, just some of those takeaways from the Macy situation.
No, there's,
We've got that process is all streamlined now?
Yeah.
All right, great. So there's a full accounting and list of all pending cases?
Yeah, and I do that with
all the-
Melanson and Heath every June, too.
And the mayor has that, or has provided a copy, and everybody else? Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so we'll start with the assessor's office on page 5. Tony, did you have any just overalls on your budget? And then we can ask if anybody has any questions on the assessor's budget on page 5.
There was a principal clerk typist, which is Carolyn's position. I wanted to switch that to a head clerk, but since might be some changes in the office going forward, so we're gonna hold off on that. So that would revert back to the 32,130.
32,130?
Yeah, instead of the requested, we're to 36,824.
So you're requesting that we cut it to 32,130?
Yes, or whatever that, I'm not sure what that,
The one that says 32,980, go to 32,130.
yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay, we'll take care of that for you.
Or whatever is in the union contract position for that.
Well,
Because
we're
it
gonna-
was a different position, I
We're gonna
wanted,
go by whatever number you give us.
well, no, the position, I wanted her to go to head clerk.
But that
there
didn't
was
happen.
there was some legal issues that I couldn't really do
So
it
you
because
give us the number.
I'm not sure what it is.
All right, then, then get back to us.
I'll get you
Before
with
the
that.
24th, because
It's
that's
a
what we're gonna take
reduction
them up.
anyway, so.
All right, even if it's $700-800, we'll take it.
Right, no, it's
Every
about
little bit helps.
4,000. It's about 4,000.
Oh, I thought this says here 32,980.
Right, but the other position requested was 36,824.
Oh, well, you didn't get that anyways.
No,
So I can't cut what's not there.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, right now in my budget here, it's 32,980.
The mayor beat us to it.
Yeah, so if this is going to 32,130,
No, that's the 32,980.
oh, okay. Oh, all right.
I
So
don't
there's
have
no
that
cut
number.
there.
I don't have that number, so. I
Okay.
trust you.
No cut. Oh, well. Got anything else we can cut?
My budget
All
was
right, all
cut
right.
this year, so.
Okay. So other than that, counselors, any questions about the assessor's budget? Counselor Leahy?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. On line item, let's see, where were we? The professional assessment services, 26,707. The mayor is proposing 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, that was for reval for the previous year, so this year we don't have a reval. It'll happen for 2017, so.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
What about the line item for the printing?
Printing and binding,
Yeah,
we,
crushed at 1,000, it's 500.
yeah, we just found out that the bills for printing all the bills and street listings was cut in half at a new company we use, so it cut down to about 500.
Okay, and I also, in your budget here, and also I noticed on this, our city council side too, the postage, you requested 1,000, we requested 1,000, he cut our,
Yeah, we go through the city clerk now,
Okay.
so everything that we stamp goes through the city clerk.
okay, and I also noticed in state travel, you guys are getting 1,000, but
Yeah,
I
it was
thought that
cut-
would
it
do
was
the mayor's
cut.
department.
Yeah, it was cut from 2 to 0 last year, and then I went through the mayor's, and it was easier for me to do mine because, it's just a lot of paperwork that you have to file and everything, and it's less work for them to do.
Okay,
It was easier for me to do it, so we put it in.
all right, I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Councilor McGivern, did I see your hand up?
Councilor Hayes started it, but assessment update, Tony, you wanted 20,000, 18,000 by the mayor.
Yeah.
Is that what you build up?
Well, there's a combination of everything. We've been doing single families, we've been doing, we did the commercials by ourselves, we did all permits, we do by ourselves, so single families, we've been outsourcing, where Jim King from Mayflower's been doing them, and it's worked out very well, so and the other thing was for personal property also, and Mayflower did some of the consulting work for us on the personal property, so I'm fine with,
So the professional services is what the, I'm sorry, I can't think of the company's name.
Mayflower and Patriot,
Patriot.
yeah.
They,
There's one, we pay about 12 grand for the software and everything to Patriot, and that comes out of professional assessment services.
and then the update is to get it done.
And then the mapping, the mapping for AGI, which is on our website, Property Viewer, that goes out of our budget. We pay for also that.
When the actual third year, and I know you do it ongoing, which
Yeah.
we commended you many years ago, but in the actual third year of the revalve itself, is there gonna be any additional expenses to these line items?
We've been getting it done for about 25 grand, which is well less than a ton of communities in the whole state, so they're usually upwards of 100,000,
The track record's been just that, and I just wanna make sure we're on the same page. Thank you.
Counselor Lisi, was your hand up, or? Okay, you're all set. Counselor Tallman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Tony, for coming down and explaining your office. One of my concerns is we talked about probably for about 10 years now, Kevin, the third assessor, and I believe Counselor Bacon might have put something in there in order recently.
Gotta get that fixed.
The third assessor, is there any more movement on that, and what happens with abatements if there's just two people? How does that get resolved?
Unless you want to go to one. That was the other recommendation.
It was a recommendation, I think, by the state, too, that we do that. Is there any,
Well, you have to have, it's a state law for an odd number just for voting purposes. But we've also discussed, a couple of people, even in our office, they don't want to do it because then they would lose their real estate privilege to sell in the city. So they both have their real estate license. Also, we've talked about maybe even an outside person who doesn't work for the city, who also maybe in the real estate business, but then they would lose their privilege also to sell because it's not ethical. We've talked about maybe Jay Willahen maybe coming back as, just a small stipend, maybe, contact him, maybe talk to him. We have the one meeting a year. It's different for us because we do all our work in-house and we do the voting. So it's a different animal than like Belchertown where Jay does all the work and he has a board of 3 board members. So he's relaying his information to them. And with Jay or someone who was like maybe another city or town we could just do a small stipend or whatever for that purpose. But the state is going to probably come down on us, where they wouldn't give us the go-ahead to do the tax rate and stuff. So it's something that we need to, probably rectify.
Well, we're expecting, you and Debbie to give us a proposal to do. I mean,
Okay.
I think we've been pretty clear, we want to do whatever DOR wants us to do, and we're counting on you guys to come up with a solution. I mean, this is your baby, this is the assessor's office, so give us a recommendation, put some legs underneath it, and we'll make it happen. I mean, Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. This was the point that I was going to raise. So I'm pretty sure that the council had given direction that we would like to see this volunteer third member to make the 3 votes on the Board of Assessors. Now, what I'm wondering if Jay Willahen in Belchertown is doing all the work in-house and they have a Board of Assessors, why in Holyoke do we have our assessor and assistant assessor, the 2 of 3 members of the Board of Assessors?
Was it the third position was when the person retired, they never funded that third position.
But the Board of Assessors is different than the Office of Assessment.
No, not in Holyoke, because it's ordinanced for three members.
I don't think I'm getting an answer to my question still. The Board of Assessors in Holyoke has 3 members,
Supposed to.
and the Board of Assessors in Belchertown seems to have 3 members as well.
But they're elected position, and Jay is the director of assessment. So he's doing all the work, he's relaying, and the 3 board members would vote on all the information, like abatements, motor vehicle excise. They're the ones who are putting their signature on all the votes and everything.
Are the elected assessors paid?
I'm not sure in Belchertown. I'm sure they probably are.
So I think we just need a little bit more research and information. I'll file something and we could bring it forward, but I'm pretty sure we gave direction last time this came up that we want a volunteer third member on the Board of Assessors. And if we can't find that third person, then I think we need to recraft the ordinance language and separate you and Debbie from the board and have a voting board.
Not to assign blame, but let's just remember that it was not the city council that had requested this. This was part of a former mayor's consolidation plan to save money, to cut this, and we were told that was legally compliant, which obviously turned out to not be the case. Councilor Bacon.
Just as a point of information, the order that I have filed asked that the council adopt advertise for the third assessor, stipulating it's a one meeting a year and to seek a volunteer.
Is that true?
So-
You take all your votes at one meeting per year?
One meeting a year. I've stipulated it in the order. So let's see if we can get somebody who is good enough to
Yeah.
do it one time a year. And if we get stuck and we can't, but that's the intent of the order that's filed for tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank
because
you.
there's two of us who do all the signatures.
Right.
So they wouldn't have to come in the office and sign or whatever, it's just.
Right.
It's just for voting purposes.
Right, to
And-
balance it out and
and-
make it,
Yeah.
right.
We keep talking about this, so this needs to
know.
just
Right, so
happen.
the order is
So-
there and hopefully we can get it done.
All right, so let's
Thank
just
you.
take leadership and get it over with.
Well, I'd just like to say that 4 meetings ago, I filed the exact same order that Linda filed for tomorrow. So, I mean, there's, the order's out there. I don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
where, you know, it's in the Black
Let's
Hole
just,
of order.
let's just do it.
Yeah.
Okay, one question. The mayor is using a 1.5% growth rate as his budget estimate for
It's not,
property values.
yeah, you shouldn't really use the word growth for it. It should be a 1.5 increase for total value
Yeah,
in the city.
okay. That,
So-
the inflationary factor or just general price
Well, the
increase?
sales,
Sales
single
for-
families have been good. Our projections, we sat in on, I sat in on some of those meetings, and, you know, our sales have been better over the past year. So we're using 2014 sales for 2016, and those have been, you know, pushed up a little for the city.
And you feel comfortable with that prices are gonna go up 1.5%?
Yeah.
Assessments overall?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anything else for the assessors? Counselor McGivern?
What-
Oh,
We
Bill.
apply that 1.5% only to single-family homes.
Right.
Not to all properties.
Right.
Just to be conservative.
Okay.
And we should know the reality by the end of the summer
Right.
before it's time to set the tax rate, so
Yeah.
we can adjust.
Yeah.
We'll be able to adjust it.
Thank you for that. Yep, excellent. Joe?
What is the new growth figure that we're looking at for
Well,
next
we won't really have any new growth
Tony,
unless we.
I've been around for a long time. What's the possible new growth figure that we're looking at? Everybody has one.
Well, we don't have it, we didn't use any last
Bellamy
year.
was very optimistic, you know, when he was sitting in the hot seat.
Yeah, but there's a difference between growth and increased value.
I understand.
So if we don't increase by the 2.5%, there is no growth.
I'm asking for the increase in new growth being like, is there new construction out there that we have
Oh, yeah,
on the
I
radar?
mean, we have some good projects that are going along right now. We're gonna add the Sullivan Steel. We have 3-4 houses right on Michelle Lane. We have other houses that are being built, and we have rehabs for a lot of buildings that we've been going out on permits. I mean, for us to get new growth, we would have to increase what our values were last year, 2.5%, and then after the 2.5%, then all growth comes in after that fact. So
So any new construction is negated by the ceiling until we go above it.
that's correct. That's correct.
A long way to get out of the hole because of the coal plant.
Well, I mean, any increase in value this year is added revenue for the city. So it's not new growth, it's per se new revenue that we can add for the city. So if it's 20,000 more than last year, then that's our new growth per se, which would be 20,000.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the assessors? Okay. We'll switch over to the treasurer's budget. Sandy, any overall thoughts on your budget before we just go into questions, or?
Nope, I think it looks pretty good,
Okay, all right.
so you guys get a hold of it.
So, just walking through how many people, in terms of the deck chairs here, in terms of bodies, we had 1, 2, 3 positions plus an extra clerical help last year.
Yes,
Now, this year, you have a treasurer, an assistant, a deputy, and a senior deputy, and then the extra clerical for 10,000. So you have an added position versus last year.
correct. We have the deputy treasurer.
Okay. So is that position filled?
Yes.
Okay. And who ended up getting that position?
A lovely lady named Kayla Rodriguez, who
Kayla.
came from People's Bank.
Okay. And did she meet all the qualifications for the job?
Yes, she did.
Okay. So they posted it?
Yes.
And it said that, you know, you had to have 3 years of accounting and bookkeeping experience and all that, and she met all those?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, was a position, it was like a reshifting at one point of the positions, because I do know at one point, we had about 100, let's see, we had you always had like 3.5 positions, and then some extra clerical help. And then it formed into 4 positions with extra clerical help. So just kind of, that's what it looked like in the fiscal year 14 budget.
Right. Basically, these are union positions, the deputy treasurer and, the senior deputy treasurer is also a union position.
Is that a new title, or has that been the title for a while?
The senior deputy treasurer is a new title that was created by the union, that was voted on.
By
I
who?
believe, last year.
The union?
The union did that.
January of 2014.
Right.
Okay. And who's in that position?
Right now, the senior deputy treasurer is not filled,
Okay, so this is
only
vacant.
because, Mr. Lumber had resigned, so.
Oh,
we
so
can-
that's your old job?
Correct. No, my job was the assistant treasurer.
Assistant treasurer, okay.
Right. So what we did was, when Mr. Lumber left,
All
we
right.
were able to fill the deputy treasurer position, which is a union position,
Okay,
with the funds that we had there, because we had none to start with. So now we have the assistant treasurer, which is Katie Jakowski, who was the senior deputy treasurer.
oh, I see, okay, so you're moving people around here?
Correct,
All right, so Katie is in the assistant treasurer position now?
correct.
All right. Now, the assistant treasurer is a non-union position, correct, though?
Correct. Yep. That was my position, and now I'm the acting treasurer.
So hopefully you have a good agreement there, Katie, because that's really a political appointee of the treasurer, basically. Yeah, right, I was gonna say, yeah, because I mean, that would kind of jeopardize your situation, and you're a good employee, and we don't want to, jeopardize that, so. So really, the senior deputy treasurer position, that's not gonna be filled then?
Not at the moment, only because, depending on what happens with the outcome, if there's the state passes the ordinance that you guys appoint a treasurer.
Right.
And you decide not to appoint the acting treasurer now,
Which is you.
right, then my position would no longer exist. The new treasurer would come in. Katie would go back down to deputy treasurer, and then the new treasurer could make a decision to keep
You or someone else
someone else.
theoretically.
Correct, because that's what the treasurer is allowed to do.
Right.
Appoint.
Right, I see. So, interesting. And that's obviously something we, at some point, need to make a decision even for this year, because this is our appointment for the remainder of this year, even no matter what happens with the special act. So let me ask you this. Hypothetically, either we leave things, the council as is, or theoretically, we appointed you. It's your intention to run the department with yourself, Katie, and Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes,
and then the extra clerical help?
yes. Now,
And to leave the senior deputy position vacant?
correct, because it's a union position, I'd have to check with the union to see if I can, if you guys decide not to fund it, then it's in the same position as the deputy treasurer, and they're gonna file a grievance against the treasurer.
Yeah, well, all these things are subject to
Correct.
appropriation.
And, yeah. If you don't.
Yeah, the people at home can't hear on the microphone,
Oh,
yeah.
I always forget about that. No, but if her position was made permanent, then mine as an acting assistant would basically be permanent, because she would theoretically appoint me if she still likes me. So then we would be able to go out and we would expect to fill that position, because we're still theoretically understaffed, but we're trying to make do because we have to leave it vacant for now.
Yeah, Counselor Valentin.
I guess I'm just comparing to last budget cycle when the council by a majority decided to not fund the deputy treasurer position. Was there any repercussions from the union on that?
Yes,
And
we were reprimanded for not having that position filled. So we, like I said, when Mr. Lumber resigned, I had money in the budget to go out and interview and find a qualified deputy treasurer that would fit the requirements of the union and the job position itself.
And that's the position that Ms. Rodriguez is in now?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I'm not a big fan of funding jobs that are vacant. You know,
I-
that's my thing is, you know, I mean, my point is if no one's foreseeably in the job or in the job, I mean, if it's something you're going to fill because you need to fill and are going to fill, well, that's another topic. But where the job is vacant, the intent is to leave it vacant, then I'm not a real big fan of funding it because my view is you should come back to us when the occurrence occurs that it needs to be filled and ask for an appropriation at that time. Katie, yeah, sure, go ahead, Katie, yeah.
So just as an example, though, when I was acting auditor, the same thing happened. I had an agreement with the union that that position in the treasurer's office was still there, but they were able to go out and hire what was basically a temporary. So that person came in to that specific union position, but knowing that there was no guarantee that they kept it, which is what we would still theoretically do. We just put it in the budget to see if you'd actually fund it, and then that's what we would do if it was still not permanent.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be a union position if it's temporary then.
Yes, it is.
It is,
still
but at least when that
They're gonna be
woman,
paying union dues as a
Yep.
temporary?
Yes.
And then what happens if the deck chairs slide around and this person's out? We're gonna end up paying unemployment compensation for the person that let go? I mean, if somebody because one of two scenarios is gonna happen here, right? We're either gonna fill the position for the remainder of the year with you or someone else. And so if we fill it with someone else, all the deck chairs are gonna go back to the way they were. If we fill it with, and if we have a special election, then conceivably, if someone in the office ran and was elected, then it would stay as is. But if somebody else external came in, then they're gonna move all these positions around anyways. And then theoretically, if we brought in a temporary position, because of all these internal maneuvers, someone's gonna end up getting laid off, and we're gonna end up paying unemployment.
right, well, I'd have to defer to legal on that, but also, I mean, the posting is as a temporary position, there's no guaranteed time span of how long they're there. So some of that might be covered under the fact that you post it as a temporary position. It's not long-term.
Yeah, we'll have to look into the temporary nature of these, who declares it temporary, and if it's a you know, I don't know, we'll have to get into that. Counselor McGee?
Just a quick question to follow up on what Sandy said. You said that you had to find money in the budget to fill the deputy treasurer because of union grievance? That's what you said?
Yes.
Where'd you find that money?
Well, when Mr. Lumber left, I appointed Katie Jakowski, and the money that was to pay for the senior deputy treasurer for the end of the year became available for me to hire a deputy treasurer. So I was in compliance with the union to say now I have a union member, which is the deputy treasurer, doing union jobs instead of management, which was Katie and myself, because she had become my assistant. So at the time, we didn't even have a union member in our office.
Yeah, but we defunded the position. That's not subject to union grievance. We're not required, what is that? That has nothing to do with anything. That's you choosing to take the money from Lumber's job and slide it over there.
That's what I did, but at the
But
same
your
time,
justification,
but at the
Your justification was that you're subject to some union
Right, and we.
displeasure. That has no impact on us.
Right,
We
but we
defunded it.
worked as a two-member office, and a lot of stuff,
But you could have put Ms. Rodriguez in the temporary senior deputy position. You have 3 funded jobs, right? Katie's old job.
right,
You moved to treasurer,
right. And
Katie moved to
became the
assistant,
right,
and Ms.
then-
Rodriguez could be in the senior deputy. In fact, she'd be making more money.
Yes, she would, but at the same time, I think we were trying with the law department, I'd have to refer to the law department to see where we were at as far as filling a position, and the position that we were filling was the deputy treasurer.
Okay. Counselor Bacon?
So I'm just wondering, given the staffing configuration that you have now, are you getting the work done?
Yes.
Thank you.
If it wasn't for my staff right now, I wouldn't be able to have a tax title sale. That kind of fallen behind the wayside, and, you know, a lot of things that weren't addressed, we were able to address with a complete staff.
Thank you.
Well, at least now we have a full-time treasurer, so things are improved right there. Counselor McGivern?
Stanley, there's significance to the positions themselves. The treasurer gets to sign off on, you can help me out, but certain things that other employees cannot. The assistant to the treasurer can fill in for treasurer in the absence of a treasurer. And that's the 2 key positions, I think, in terms of the office that are necessary under the way the statutes are now. The difference of what you're explaining is, that we, for budgetary purposes, were able to eliminate money from the budget last year because of the way positions were being filled. But the union said, well, wait a minute, because the non-union people are doing union work.
Correct.
And that's what the union brought to the attention. And unfortunately, when we defund something, it doesn't change the position because that's in the contract, which the mayor negotiates, subject to appropriation, but we cannot eliminate the position. But they're right or wrong, or whether they win the agreements or not, you know, when they see non-union people doing the work, they can come in and say, we want this position filled. Am I wording it correctly?
Yes.
But the treasurer and assistant treasurer, you know, the bulk of the work, the bulk of the decisions made, but more important, the signatures for a number of different things, from the bonding to the tax title, things like that, have to be these positions.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, with the extra clerical help, it seems like we've had a lot of turnover in that position as extra clerical help. At least it's my believed observation. How many people have served in that position in the last 3 or 4 years?
Since I've been there, I'm gonna say
I guess go to 3. All right.
and one of the persons has come back to work for me. And that would be
Who's in that position now?
Jeff Burns.
Jeff Burns, okay.
Yes.
And so what's the qualifications to be in that position?
Well, basically, that extra clerical was set up, I'm gonna say, previously to Mr. Lumber's position, and it was, set up to college students coming in to, work in the office, answer the phones, file, do general work that, other people didn't have the time to do, filing. And then it gives them experience being a college student or a high school student to work after school. They only work 4 hours a day. So that was the extra clerical that's been set up for years with our Mr. Donahue.
Right. Well, we've had to some credit to Mr. Donahue, I will say this. I mean, he's had some really experienced people in there. I mean, I remember we've had former DOR agents and things that have served in that capacity, that they were retired and otherwise.
Right.
And then now it just seems like I've seen a number of individuals that, I don't know if this is an entry level type of thing or.
It is an entry level, but with the tax titles, when John came on board and the tax titles or the properties were in such disarray, we needed a person to just do the grunt work, and that's basically what that person does. goes into the system. Make sure that the taking is done properly, make sure that,
They have a skill set to do that level of work, though?
it was with training, that, I mean, I could do, right now, Jeff is experienced enough I can leave him alone and he can do the job without me worrying that it's not being done, you know. It's.
And those people just are somebody you pick, right? You don't actually, are those posted out? Can I go to see a posting for those jobs, or are these people that,
I believe they were posted at one time, and like I said.
All right, maybe you can give me a copy of the last posting for that.
I'll check with
Yeah.
Personnel.
All right, great. All right, anybody else? Counselor McGivern?
Sandy, there's, part of the budget, and it's there for informational purposes only for the first time, Bellamy included revenue projections. I know you've been with, you were with John Lumber through at least the last 2 or 3 fiscal years in terms of tax titles. The revenue we show from fiscal 2014 was around $30,000. And this year projected $20,000. Next year, the projected, or this coming year, the budget we're talking about, fiscal 16, is the mayor's looking at only about $5,000. Is that something that you could forecast, or something that's been discussed with you, or?
Yeah, I did review this with the mayor, and, each year, as we do our due diligence and look at the properties and, you know, check with other departments in regards to what's in community development, what's in planning, how we're going to take it over, it's getting better. You know, I mean, this tax title auction is gonna be around 2 million. That takes, I would say maybe, I'm gonna say about 200 pieces of property that will be in that tax title. And then hopefully in September, moving forward, we're going to take the properties with the blessings of the council and have another auction and see if we can get some of the properties back on the tax rolls.
Which is a good thing. Is the trend, though, that there's less properties as we're going along, that we've?
That's my goal, is to get less in tax titles and more on the tax.
Back on the books?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Soto?
Thank you, Mr. President. You and I have had conversations regarding properties in City Hall. What kind of interest, because it seems like this is the big thing Mr. Bellamy was saying earlier, like this is the knight in shining armor that's coming to the City Hall. We're gonna sell these properties and get the big bucks. And what type of interest have you had already for the buildings that are existing now?
Well, getting
The
back to.
properties that we do own.
Okay, the properties that we do own, there are interested parties. They are going through the process with planning, community development, see if they can work together and, you know, put them back on the books. My job as the treasurer is to try to get the people that haven't paid their taxes to pay their taxes. And I feel with this tax title sale, auction, whatever you want to call it, is going to help the city. I mean, it's not the be-all solution, but it's going to help. If I can do this tax title sale and get at least 2 million for the city, that's better than not doing anything.
Oh, I agree. But let's be realistic though too. So let's use, for example, 189 Chestnut Street, the old Holyoke, 188 Chestnut Street. They're behind. What do you expect to get out of there?
Okay,
We'll just say that for
okay,
just
so
the property
Chestnut Street, I know, is that York's Garage?
No.
No,
it's,
okay,
further.
see,
Okay. The old Hello Holyoke.
Hello, Hoyle.
Just using that for example, I
Okay.
mean, so let's say they owe the city $100,000 worth of back taxes, and the place is half burnt. Do you really believe somebody's gonna give $100,000 for that property?
No, I don't. I mean, that's realistic. I don't think
Okay.
anybody's gonna give me or the city $100,000 for a building that's half burnt. But if I can put it back on the tax rolls as a renovation, then let's go for it. Right now, it's.
Oh, I
sitting there
agree,
doing
but
nothing.
what we heard earlier, if I'm not mistaken, I could be the only one hearing this, but what we heard earlier, we were gonna go after and get what was owed to the city.
Correct. That's what the
Okay.
tax title auction is going to be.
Okay, I wish you luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Valentin?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to the tax titles, when John Lumbra was in the treasurer's office, I had worked closely with him on developing a list of properties in the ward that were involved with back taxes, and he actually got us a list per ward, contacted us, all of us as ward counselors regarding asking for help with, ideas and suggestions. And so I know Councilor Bartley and I did some work in our ward specifically to this. I'm not sure about the other ward counselors. I won't speak, for them. But one of the things that I did at that point was I mailed out letters to about 50 people in Ward 4 that owed back taxes. And so right before John was leaving the office, in the midst of all the other things that, of course, were being requested of him before he departed, I asked for an updated list so I could know kind of how productive my letters had been. I had some cases that he had notified me individually about. The best one, in my opinion, somebody who came in and paid off $19,000 that they owed in back taxes. And that was because they got a letter from me and they said they didn't want to get a second letter from me, so that worked. And I take much pride in that. But anyways, I know that I've been trying to get this information from your office, and to be completely honest with you, it's been frustrating because I feel like I'm getting half information. I also know that Councilor Vacan had, I think, filed an order about getting an update regarding where payment plans are at. So I'm just using this opportunity to say that, I'll speak for myself, and I'm assuming Councilor Vacan with the order that she had filed, that, to use us as ward councilors to try to get some of this work done, because I think the tax title sale is great, I think the auction is great, and all of these things together, can really, hopefully can bring some added revenue to the city. But anything that can be sent to us as an updated list of where these properties fall in terms of our wards, I think would be beneficial. It also will give us an idea of how productive our approaches have been. So if you could prioritize that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the treasurer's budget on page 6? Yes, sir. Counselor McGee.
I thought Tony was going to stay, so I was going to ask all three. Towards year end, finance always sees, inter-office transfers of money to cover other things that weren't in one item covering the other. Have you guys had any transfers in the last few months to cover things that moved it around from different items, or have you transferred it to other departments to help them out? Because as I'm looking at the budget, I'm trying to make sure if I'm cutting something, I'm not cutting it when you have used it and we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, the
So
only
to both
thing,
offices, and I'll ask Tony tomorrow. I actually filed an order to have something presented to us, and I don't know if you received that order or not, so that's why I ask.
no, the only thing that I've done since I've come on board is transferred some money. Unfortunately, when we had the issue with the Essex House, we had to take the displaced tenants and find them housing, or, temporary housing. John had indicated to the Board of Health that the treasurer would take care of it in regards to, I believe, its tax possession property costs. And that kind of knocked my budget down a little bit, so I had to transfer some money into there to cover up other expenses, not up, other expenses, which were the geriatrics utility bill that the treasurer had to pay, and some utility bills on High Street. But other than that, that's the only transfer I've done.
Can you get me a list?
Sure.
Of the money that you use?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Counselor Soto?
If I may, on that, subject, because I'm getting a lot of calls regarding that. So I'm glad Councilor McGee said that. Can you provide us all of us with a list, a copy of all the expenses that have been paid out to date regarding the Essex House? Some of the business owners are saying that they're not, they haven't been properly compensated. I believe there's attorneys involved, so we won't, but some others are, have received funds. Can you agree with that, or
I would have to refer that to law department, because that would be something that, the only thing that the treasurer did in regards to was to pay the hotel bill, because the Board of Health.
Okay, so,
But other than that, I haven't, in the treasurer's office, reimbursed anything or done anything for any tenants there, other than pay for the housing.
for the house, for the
Hotel.
residents?
Yes, for the hotel.
And then, but there was also monies paid for the relocation for the beauty salon. Where did that money come from?
That was the law, you'd have to talk to the law department. That didn't come out of my budget.
All right, so if you can provide us that list, I'd be really appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Counselor Tallman?
Yeah, just briefly, Sandy, on borrowing certification of 53040, I'm just looking at a couple numbers there in parentheses from the previous year. Can you explain that, those numbers? I think it's 62,099 and 32,099. Is that a deficit or something, or?
I believe that is, and let me just clarify here with the auditor. Was that because of the re-certification? Right, so that was the bond premium. Right. Yes, I believe we did some reselling of the bonds, I believe in September 2014 is
Okay.
when we did that. So that's why it was,
So that's like just something that, what is it, money that's lost or gained?
no, that
Coming
was-
back in?
Yeah, because right, we sold that, that's revenue.
That's revenue, okay, well, I'm just saying, when I see parentheses, I think it's a
Oh, no,
negative number.
Sorry, that
Yeah.
is revenue, my misinterpretation.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Sandy, I'm looking at the transfer report from, dated April 28th. In it, it says that the money that you moved into the deputy treasurer line came from the senior deputy position, not from the treasurer's position.
No, I'm sorry, I
All right.
reclassified that, yes.
So
because-
that came from Katie's old job
Correct.
into that one.
Correct, sorry, my bad.
All right. Okay. Councilor McGivern?
President, if I could, on page 47,
Yep.
see, page 47 in our budget is the debt principal and interest. The request for short-term debt service, they call it, is $150,000 divided into interest and principal, but the total is 150. Do we know what the projections are for short-term debt in the upcoming year?
For 2006, yeah.
Yeah. We were working with a $50,000 budget in 2015. 2014 was 126,000, but I was just curious as to why 150?
I believe, yeah, they're bands, but I'm not too sure what they,
Well, John's not with us anymore, so I
I
think we
know,
better
and I'd
find
have
an
to-
answer to
yes.
the question, or maybe it won't be there come
Well,
July
as I
1st.
understand, the interest payment is likely required, but the principal payment was something this was something John wanted to do, as I recall, in last year's budget as a policy decision to have us pay $100,000 towards this versus allowing it to go to full bonding, the full amount of the principal. So we cut it last year because we said, yeah, that's nice, but we need, from a cash flow perspective, we'd rather it go to bond. The interest portion of it, we stayed with that because that is an obligation if we're gonna be doing some short-term interest borrowing. And it looks like from this, you're planning on doing that again. So the 50 looks like required, the 100 last year was optional. I can't see why it wouldn't be yet again optional, and we did cut it out of last year's budget. Yeah.
On the same page, last year, we had an explanation from John about the line item or object number would be 59128, called a multi-purpose bond. It was something that began in the 2015 cycle, and now is in that, it looks like a full 495,000 request, and below it, there's two additional object items, line items for 450, 400, and $280,000. Can we get an explanation of what this is for? That's under long-term debt. I believe the same items are carried down under long-term debt principal.
Hold on one sec. I just want to make sure I'm giving you the right information.
See, I believe if I remember, and I shouldn't be going on memory these days, but the explanation was that there was a number of things that were refinanced that got better interest rates.
Yes.
But we kind of lose track of what are we paying off when they're just listed as multi-purpose.
Well, the one that's called 2014 refunding is with the payoff of some previous bonds. One of them I know was dated 2004, because we just got an interest payment for it, and sure enough, it's $20,000 less than the previous amount for that. So we are actually saving money on a quarterly basis for that. So that's the refunding of an old bond, the refinancing and refunding of an old bond. Multi-purpose is a new bond, which Sandy will explain to you.
Right, in September, we did the refinancing, and, you don't have this, but in September 18th, we did the Series A's, we did the garage. We did that for $1 million. We did the additional parking facilities, that was for $827,000. The fire trucks, we did those for $1.5 million. And then the high school / Dean, there's two parts, there's 1 and 2. Those were also refinanced. And the science lab 1, which is the high school, was $1,029,649, and the 2, which is Dean, is $125,351, which would be a total of $3,132,000 that he did a refinance. I'm sorry, so
That's the multi-purpose.
multi-purpose, that's the one that goes into the multi-purpose, sorry.
So these are all grouped together,
Yes,
got a better rate,
yes.
and when will it be paid off? Is it the better rate, but is the term of the bond longer than what the original bond was, or?
They usually reissue them for 20 years.
Yeah,
I mean, if we get a better rate, that's great, but if we just end up paying the better rate interest for a longer period of time, are we really saving?
Not really. Short term.
I'm kind of asking on that.
right, I know. Like I said, I wasn't privy to what John was doing at the time. We just have to go back and look at the schedule. Yeah, we'd have to look at the
Okay.
schedule to see what the savings.
Thank you. It's not something I would say we would cut, maybe the short
I
term.
know it's not something that he would do
But
on a
it'd be
whim.
something I think we'd like to have answers to, just so
Right.
we know how to explain it.
How about this, Sandy, to Joe's point, if you could just maybe give us a list of like all the stuff that's out there that's, in the projects, it might be good just to take a sort of trip down memory lane of all the different bonding things we've bonded for, and just sort of like, how much is the total, that adds up, like, what's the total indebtedness? It's for all of these things, and, so much for interest, so much for principal. That might be helpful.
Sure.
If you, over the next week or so, that would be good.
Mr. President.
Yep. Counselor Bacon?
Thank you. If we could also just get a recap on how our debt ratio is relative to the rest of our budget. so that when we're looking at the capital budget, we see how much really borrowing we really are in any position to do. Thanks.
And then the other piece of it too is, you know, some of the things like the high school, you know, we bond for it. I'm interested to know, are we starting to get payments back from school, you know, building administration and stuff like that on those? And where are those dollars appearing? Because, you know, all that stuff's supposed to be 80% reimbursed, a lot of it. All right. Anything left on pages 6 and 47 for the treasurer? Hearing none. Okay, thank you very much, Sandy. Katie?
Thank you.
One thing, Kevin?
Oh,
If I
I'm
may,
sorry, Todd. Yep.
Just to Sandy and Bellamy, we had that audit done in the treasurer's office, or the year-end audit that we kept hearing about. Don't we get a report back to finance in order to invite them in to go over it by state law?
Yes, it's not complete. The audit
Okay.
we're supposed to get a draft of it actually this week.
Okay,
It was held up because the schools were a little late in giving them some information. We were fine with the schools.
I'm just asking because I want to be in compliance with our side. Yep. Okay, perfect.
Beautiful, thank you. Good catch. All right, great. So that only leaves our tax collector, last but certainly not least. David, any opening thoughts? Maybe you could also touch on the overall collection rate and what you're hearing, and then we'll go through your budget.
Sure. Collection's been going good. I think we're gonna come out in the 97, 98 percentile, which is typically about where we usually are. I think last year was a little lower, so we'll be a little higher this year. Things in the office are going well. We're gonna have a new deputy collector, starting July 1st. And by that, we're gonna have we're gonna have a ton of savings in a couple line items here, which I'll go over later. But other than that, things are well in the tax collecting.
All right, so let's get right to it. The mayor and Bellamy pointed out, that it looks like they're putting $7,000 in your postage line. So that's one addition from the original budget we had from a week or so ago. Walk us through your expense side. I think basically your personnel side, there's no changes from last year or current. Anything you want to talk to us about there in terms of, you mentioned some savings and you have this new deputy collector and.
So, we've been talking about going out to bid for the deputy collector position for quite some time. I think it was brought up last year in this meeting last year. Throughout the year, in doing some thinking, crunching some numbers together, what we figured out was in my first 4 years here, I have been able to negotiate with the deputy collectors to not charge us for real estate and property tax bills anymore. I think that saved us $4,000. Not charge us for motor vehicle tax bills anymore. I think that saved us another $4,000. And in negotiating, I knew that these deputy collectors, they want to be in communities like Holyoke. So we essentially have a little bit of leverage. They want to be here because there's a high poverty rate and there's high delinquencies, which means more money for them. And moving forward, I figured, well, if I can get a break there, let's see if we can push it a little further to my biggest budgetary concern, which is postage. Postage goes up every year, extremely expensive, my biggest line item. So what we did was, and this is together with Dave Martins and my assistant, Debbie Haslam, we decided to put the wording into the RFP that makes the deputy collector pay for all expenses related to deputy collecting, which include postage, the tax bills.
So the quarterly tax bills that go out, he's
Correct.
picking up the stamps for those.
Correct. He's going to pick
Interesting.
up all of that. And what we did, and the reason we did that, is we looked back historically what these folks have made from the city. And in the last 3 years, they've made close to 150 last year, 130 the year before that. So they've made a good chunk of change. So we figured if we put that in, let's see if we can get away with putting that in the RFP and see if we get any bites. It doesn't hurt. So we did that, put the language in there, and we got a deputy collector to say, yeah, we will do that. So that eliminated $21,000 of that. I originally asked for $28,000. That eliminated about $21,000. I do need some postage in there because we do send out tax title letters. We do send,
Sure.
you know, if someone's check bounces, we send them something.
Right.
You know, things of that nature. We do still need some in
Oh,
there.
yeah, but 3/4 of it you got rid of.
Gone, correct.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. That's good. That's good.
Can we clone you?
And the service is just as good with the new one that's coming in? you believe?
Yeah, you know, and they're supposed to be a little bit more modern. Well, they have a kiosk that we're gonna put possibly in the library, and outside here for when our office is closed. They go on a computer on a kiosk and they can pay it. So they can still pay it here, they can still pay it at home, online. They can pay it over the phone. So we're opening up new avenues for them to pay while we're bringing down our expenses, and I think that's going to help us gain, you know, some more taxes, collect more taxes.
Super. Are you ever gonna get to a point where you could pay your taxes with a credit card and not have to pay like any service fees to the city or anything like that? Can you pay your taxes, one, with a credit card? I'm not sure about that. And then,
Yes.
okay, you can do that.
can
Is
do
there
that.
a
Fee, though?
There is a fee. So see, yeah.
And the reason there's a fee is because if there's not a fee, it's because the business covers the fee.
Okay.
So if there wasn't a fee, then I would have to have
You'd
a
have to
line
pay that.
item. I would have to have a line item to cover all of those fees. Because the companies that we use, all of them across the board, ask for fees. And
See, that would be a nice one to eat if you could get the deputy collectors down the road, if you're looking for other bennies, if they could swallow the processing fee for the credit cards. Because I know a number of, folks have mentioned to me, gee, I'd like to pay, instead of writing a check for my property taxes, I'd pay it with my credit card and I get the points. See, I mean, honestly,
Oh, we
God,
get-
I mean,
we
people
get
think
that all the
way.
time.
You get cash back,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You could get 1% or whatever back, and everybody's looking for a little break, and if you pay it, it's something you're paying anyways, you could either get the points or a 1% cash back on it. But they don't do it because of the service fee, which makes it financially not advantageous to do that.
Correct. So, like I said before, if they're not gonna cover it, then we have to cover that fee because the merchants,
Oh, yeah, right
that
now,
we
I
use,
understand,
so.
I understand. Counselor Bacon.
Thank you. But if a person does a debit or writes a check, there's no additional fee?
No.
If they use a debit card, there's a 40 cents fee.
There is. What
Online.
if they do the automatic out of their checking, is there a fee too?
Automatic auto checking, no fee. We do offer that service. So,
So,
and that
there
service
is-
is through People's Bank. So what you can do is you could sign up for that service, and we don't charge you anything. We take it directly from your account.
Oh, okay.
Right, so there is one way to do it without a
Yes.
fee.
Correct.
Okay. All right, Counselor Tom?
Thanks for coming down, thanks for the work you're doing, and 97%, that's not good enough for me. I want to see like 99%. 98 or 99, okay?
By the way, where we are is very good for a city like.
Like Holyoke, yeah, I know it is. The question I had is on your other contracted services, 53,100,
Yes.
you requested 5,000 and the mayor gave 9,500. What's that for?
Well, I had requested 5,000, and then when I went in my meeting with the mayor, some things had changed. Now,
Okay.
during the past few years, we've had really rough winters. During those rough winters, parking tickets skyrocket. After 21 days, there's a $5 fee added. And then after some time, we send a demand, and then we send out notices. Now, those notices are what we send out before we mark them at the registry, which gains us, the city, an extra $20. So to send those notices, I have been struggling to do that the last couple years with just the 5,000.
Okay.
If we're gonna have winters like that, like we've had the last couple years, I'm gonna need some additional funds to send those notices out so we can tag them with the extra $20 fee, which in turn makes
Come
the
back.
city more money.
Okay. It's just unusual to see the number, you're getting more than what you requested, that's all, it just sort of stood out for me, but if that, I guess that explains it, but if